Elon Musk had always been known for thinking outside the box, but today, on a quiet afternoon, he was simply craving tacos. It was one of those rare moments when he could escape the relentless schedule of his multi-billion-dollar enterprises. The world outside his office buzzed with endless emails, SpaceX launches, and Tesla stock fluctuations. But here, at Taco Bell, he could be just another guy ordering a meal, or so he thought. The small-town Taco Bell was far from the glamour of Silicon Valley, tucked away in a corner of a strip mall. Elon slid into a booth near the back, hoping to blend in with the midday crowd. There was something oddly comforting about the simplicity of fast food. The way it had no expectations, no high-stakes negotiations, just an easy, greasy bite to eat. The low hum of chatter and the scent of seasoned beef mixed with the tang of salsa in the air. It was peaceful. For the first time in months, he could almost forget that his every move was being watched, dissected, and analyzed by millions. His mind wandered briefly to his childhood. How different life had been then. Growing up in Pretoria, South Africa, with a mix of loneliness and ambition. Even as a child, he was always thinking ahead, always asking, what's next? It was a mindset that had propelled him through countless obstacles, from his tech ventures to space exploration. Yet today, here he was, just another guy in a Taco Bell booth. The bell above the door chimed as more customers filed in. Elon glanced around, his gaze briefly locking with a middle-aged man sitting at the counter, his eyes flicking away quickly as if recognizing him but not daring to approach. The thought made Elon smile. He had become so used to this, the sudden recognition, the whispers, the way people would pretend they weren't staring. It was both amusing and exhausting. But today was different. Today, he was just Elon Musk, no SpaceX rockets or Tesla batteries, just a guy trying to enjoy his lunch. He stood up to approach the counter, already mentally choosing his order. The classic Crunchwrap Supreme, a safe choice. But as he walked past a table in the corner, something caught his attention. Two young boys, maybe around 10 or 12, sat huddled together, whispering in low voices. Elon, still half in his own thoughts, didn't think much of it at first. But then, as he stepped closer to the counter, one of the boys muttered something that made his heart skip a beat. "I think it's him," the boy said. Elon froze, just out of sight, but close enough to catch the words. He didn't know why, but his curiosity was piqued. He glanced over his shoulder, catching the boy's eyes for a split second before the child quickly looked away. "Shh, don't say that," the second boy whispered back, his voice barely audible. "He'll hear you." The hair on the back of Elon's neck prickled. For a moment, he wondered if he was hearing things. The last thing he needed was another conspiracy theory swirling around his life. But something in the boys' voices, a mixture of awe and caution, struck a chord with him. They weren't just talking about any celebrity. They were talking about him. Elon felt his stomach tighten, the familiar feeling of being under a microscope. He glanced at the counter, pretending to focus on the menu, but the words echoed in his mind. "He'll hear you." He tried to shake off the unsettling feeling and ordered his meal, but the conversation behind him lingered in his mind. Something about it didn't feel right. As he sat down to wait for his food, Elon's thoughts raced. The idea of being watched wasn't new to him. He'd gotten used to it after years of public attention. But today was different. The whispers felt like a sign of something larger, something he couldn't ignore. The boys knew something. Maybe they were just kids being kids, but there was a glint of knowing in their eyes that made Elon uneasy. He glanced back one more time, but the boys had their heads down, acting as though nothing had happened. As the minutes ticked by, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted, something important, something he wasn't quite ready to understand yet. The scent of warm tortillas and melted cheese filled the air as Elon sat at his booth, waiting for his meal to be prepared. The voices around him blended into a dull hum, but his mind was elsewhere, drifting between the present moment and the distant past. The boy's whispers were still echoing in his mind, like a riddle that refused to be solved. Elon didn't often think about his childhood. He preferred the present, the companies, the innovations, the rockets, where he could control his future with every decision. But sometimes, when the weight of the world seemed to press too hard against him, memories from his youth would surface unbidden, like fragments of a forgotten dream. Growing up in South Africa hadn't been easy. His parents had split when he was young, and his childhood had been marked by isolation. He wasn't like the other kids at school. He wasn't interested in the same things they were: sports, parties, socializing. Instead, he was consumed by his books, by ideas that seemed too big for the world he inhabited. His escape was always the future. If he could get through the awkwardness of adolescence, if he could survive the isolation, he believed that one day he'd be able to build something that mattered. In those days, he dreamt of making a difference, of changing the world. But back then, it had seemed impossible. Elon had always been the odd one out, the outsider who didn't quite belong. Even when he moved to Canada and then to the United States, the feeling of not fitting in lingered. Yet here he was now, years later, an internationally recognized entrepreneur, the face of some of the world's most innovative companies. Tesla, SpaceX, the Boring Company. He had achieved things that few people could even dream of. But the more success he gained, the more he realized that something was still missing. He hadn't expected fame, hadn't wanted it. All he ever really wanted was to be understood, to have his ideas validated. But the price of that understanding had been his privacy, and with it, a sense of normalcy. That's why today felt strange. He didn't belong here, in this Taco Bell, not in the same way everyone else did. The normalcy of it, people sitting around, laughing, talking about their day, felt foreign. Here, Elon was just a man having lunch, not the man who was shaping the future. But the boys had noticed him, and their words hung in the air like a whisper from another world. Elon looked up as the sound of his name broke through his reverie. The cashier, a young woman with a bright smile, slid his tray across the counter. He nodded in acknowledgement, his thoughts still clouded by the boys. As he reached for his meal, he caught sight of them again, sitting at their table near the window, their heads close together, speaking in hushed tones. They were watching him now. He could feel their eyes on his back, like two silent observers in the shadows. Elon's instincts kicked in, the same instincts that had helped him navigate countless challenges in the business world. His mind was racing. What did they know? Were they just regular kids, or was something more going on? His thoughts were interrupted as his phone buzzed in his pocket, but he ignored it. This was not the time for business. He took his meal back to the booth and sat down. But he couldn't shake the feeling that his moment of peace had just been interrupted by something he wasn't prepared for. Something was happening, and it was happening right under his nose. The strange encounter with the boys had made him feel vulnerable, a sensation that was both unfamiliar and unsettling. Elon dug into his food, the Crunchwrap Supreme tasting surprisingly comforting. He needed to focus. There had to be an explanation for what had just happened. The boys were probably just kids, lost in their own world. But the way they had looked at him, their quiet murmurs, was not something he could easily dismiss. The silence between bites felt heavier than usual, and he felt an odd pressure building within him. His gaze flicked back to the boys one more time. They hadn't moved. They were still whispering, heads huddled close together. And then, for a brief moment, one of them glanced up and locked eyes with him. This time, Elon didn't look away. He held the boy's gaze, the unease building in his chest. There was something almost knowing in the boy's eyes, something that suggested they weren't just talking about him. They were talking to him. He couldn't explain it, but a nagging feeling clawed at him. It was like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit, a question that needed an answer. And Elon Musk wasn't one to leave questions unanswered. Elon couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. It wasn't just the feeling of being watched, although that was unsettling in its own right. It was the why. Why had these two boys whispered about him? What did they know that he didn't? He tried to ignore it at first, pushing the thought aside like he had so many other distractions in his life. There was no room for paranoia in his world. But no matter how many times he took another bite of his Crunchwrap Supreme, the questions wouldn't leave him. He finished his meal quickly, his appetite suddenly gone. The boys were still there, whispering. Now, they were looking directly at him. Elon stood, his instincts kicking in. Something wasn't right. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he needed to know what they were talking about. As he walked towards the door, he hesitated. Should he confront them? Or would that just make things worse, fuel their curiosity even more? He turned around, heading back toward the boy's table. The noise of the restaurant seemed to quiet in his mind, everything falling away until only the sound of his own footsteps echoed in his ears. He was halfway across the room when one of the boys caught his eye again, this time not with a glance but with a stare, almost daring him to approach. As Elon reached the table, both boys looked up, their faces lit with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They didn't expect him to come over. That much was clear. One of them, the older of the two with dark brown hair and a t-shirt that read, "Future Innovator," shifted uncomfortably in his seat, while the other, smaller boy, seemed more curious, almost intrigued. "Hi," Elon said, his voice steady but not without the edge of uncertainty. He wasn't sure what he was expecting, but it wasn't this. "I couldn't help but overhear you two talking. You said something about me. What was it?" The older boy swallowed, glancing at his friend. It was as if he was trying to decide whether to speak, weighing the risk of saying too much. Finally, he looked up at Elon, his eyes wide. We weren't sure if it was you," the older boy stammered. "But, well, it's not every day you see someone like you in a place like this." Elon's brow furrowed. This wasn't what he had expected. He'd been bracing himself for something far more sinister. "Someone like me?" he asked, leaning in slightly. "Yeah," the smaller boy added, his voice barely above a whisper. "Like, famous. But not like just famous. Like different." He trailed off, unsure of how to continue. Elon blinked, unsure of where this was going. He couldn't tell whether the kids were playing some sort of game or if they truly knew something. His curiosity got the better of him. "What do you mean, different?" The boys exchanged a quick look, then the older one cleared his throat. You're not just someone with a lot of money," he said slowly, his voice filled with a strange sort of reverence. "You're like part of something bigger. A bigger plan." A chill ran down Elon's spine. The boy's words were vague, but they landed heavy in the air. "A bigger plan?" Elon repeated, trying to make sense of it. "What kind of plan?" The older boy shifted uneasily, clearly unsure of how far he should go. The younger boy, however, seemed bolder, leaning forward just slightly. "You're going to change the world in ways no one even understands yet," he said, his voice almost too serious for his age. "But some things are going to happen before that. Big things. Things you might not be ready for." Elon's mind raced. He felt a sharp pang in his chest. Was this some sort of prank? Some random, bizarre encounter that had spiraled out of control? Or was there something more to this? Something hidden beneath the surface? He wanted to ask more questions, to dig deeper into what they meant, but the conversation was already spiraling into territory that felt too strange, too unsettling. Before he could speak again, the older boy stood up abruptly. "Look, we don't know for sure," he said, his voice growing a little more panicked. "We've just heard things. Things we weren't supposed to know." The younger boy looked up at Elon, his eyes full of a kind of unsettling certainty. "We didn't mean to scare you," he said softly. "We just thought you should know." Elon stood frozen, his mind buzzing with 100 questions, none of which had clear answers. He wanted to push further, to demand more. But something about the boy's demeanor told him that this conversation wasn't meant to go any deeper. They were speaking in riddles, and they knew more than they were letting on. Without another word, Elon turned and walked away, the sounds of the restaurant gradually returning to his awareness. He didn't know what to make of what had just happened, but one thing was certain: he couldn't ignore it. The feeling that something was about to change, that something was happening just beneath the surface, lingered with him as he exited the Taco Bell, his mind racing. What was it they had said? That he was part of something bigger? That things were going to happen before he was ready? Elon wasn't sure what to believe, but he knew one thing for sure. This encounter was just the beginning. The boys reveal cryptic clues about Elon's future, sparking his growing curiosity and unease. The tension builds as Elon begins to realize that there might be forces at play that he doesn't yet understand. Elon had never been one to believe in signs. He believed in data, in technology, in numbers. The future, for him, was a product of hard work and calculated risk. There was no room for superstition in his world, until now. The further he walked away from Taco Bell, the heavier his mind became. The words of the two boys echoed in his head. "You're part of something bigger." The cryptic nature of their message had stirred something inside him, a sense of urgency that he couldn't shake. He dismissed it initially, thinking it was just an odd encounter, some random event that wouldn't amount to anything. But as he stepped out into the cool air of the parking lot, the unease began to settle into his bones. As Elon made his way toward his car, he checked his phone. A text from Gwyn, his trusted advisor at SpaceX, flashed across the screen. "Urgent. There's been a security breach at the rocket facility. We need you back here ASAP." His pulse quickened. It was rare for anything to disrupt the meticulous operations of SpaceX, but this sounded serious. Without hesitation, he typed a quick response, "On my way." The drive back to the SpaceX facility was a blur. His thoughts kept drifting back to the boys, their strange words. Things you might not be ready for. The warning had felt so real. Elon gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white. It wasn't like him to get lost in such thoughts, but this situation was different. The boys hadn't just been talking about a random future. They were talking about him, and that was the part that unsettled him the most. When he arrived at the SpaceX headquarters, Gwyn was waiting for him by the entrance, her expression grim. She was usually the calm, collected one, but today, there was a noticeable edge to her demeanor. "Elon, we've had a breach in the system," Gwyn said, walking quickly beside him. "We think someone's been trying to hack into our communications network." "Hacked?" Elon's voice was sharp. "How bad?" "Bad," she replied tersely. "Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. We've already locked down the system, but I'm worried this could be a distraction for something bigger." "Bigger? What do you mean?" Gwyn stopped, her face pale. "We intercepted a message earlier. It was addressed to you." Elon froze. "A message? From who?" She hesitated. "We're still working on tracing it, but we think it's coming from someone inside the company." The words hit him like a punch. Elon had built SpaceX from the ground up, trusted the people around him with everything he had. To think that there might be someone in his own ranks who was undermining him was unthinkable. His mind raced as Gwyn handed him a tablet with the message. It was short, cryptic, and chilling. "You are being watched. Your next step will determine everything. They are already here." Elon's blood ran cold as he read the message. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The text felt like a warning, one that was linked to the strange encounter at Taco Bell, one that was more than just a coincidence. Could this all be connected? Was someone watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake? "This is bad," Gwyn said, her voice strained. "Whoever is behind this knows everything about you, Elon. They know your moves, your next steps, even your personal life. It's as if they've been tracking you for years." Elon's heart pounded in his chest. The boy's words came back to him in a flash. Things you might not be ready for. Was this what they had been talking about? Had they known about this? About the breach before it even happened? Was it all leading to something bigger? Something that Elon wasn't prepared to face? "Do you think it's related to the breach?" Elon asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," Gwyn admitted, "but I think we need to move fast. We're pulling in experts from all over to get to the bottom of this." "But Elon, I think you should be prepared for anything." He nodded, his mind racing. The world he had spent years building, a world of technology, space exploration, and innovation, now felt precarious. Something was happening, something he couldn't control, and that terrified him. As Elon turned to walk toward the main building, his phone buzzed again. It was another message, this time from an unknown number. His heart skipped a beat when he saw the text, "They're coming for you. The clock is ticking." He didn't need to ask who they were. He already knew. The question was, who was behind it? The plot thickens as Elon faces a security breach at SpaceX that seems to be tied to a much larger, mysterious force. The connection between the boy's cryptic words and the danger now unfolding begins to become clearer, leaving Elon and the reader on edge. The days following the breach were a blur. Elon barely slept. His mind was consumed by questions about the boys, the cryptic messages, and the unsettling feeling that something was happening just out of sight, beyond his understanding. The words they had whispered echoed in his mind, growing louder with each passing hour. things you might not be ready for. At SpaceX, the best minds in cybersecurity worked around the clock to trace the source of the attack, but every lead turned up nothing. The systems were secure again, but the feeling of vulnerability lingered. Whoever was behind the breach had left no trace. It was as if they had known exactly how to cover their tracks, anticipating every step. Elon sat at his desk in his office late one night, staring at the blinking cursor on his computer screen, hoping for a breakthrough. The weight of it all was starting to crush him. The boy's warning, the encrypted message, the sense that he was being pulled into something much bigger than himself. It was all too much. He looked up from the screen as Gwen entered the room, her expression grave. She didn't even need to speak for Elon to know that something was wrong. "They found something," Gwen said, holding up a tablet. It's not just a hack, Elon. It's a message. From someone close to you." Elon's stomach sank. He stood up quickly, his heart racing. "What do you mean, someone close to me?" Gwen hesitated before passing him the tablet. Elon's eyes skimmed the words on the screen. "We've been watching you for years, Elon. You've always been part of something greater, but now it's time for you to take your place. The world is ready for what you've been hiding. The countdown has begun." The message was signed with a symbol Elon didn't recognize, an intricate design that looked almost like a combination of an ancient sigil and a modern digital code. "This can't be happening," Elon muttered under his breath, shaking his head. "Who would send something like this?" Gwen's voice was low, almost as if she was afraid to say it. "We think it's someone inside SpaceX. Someone who has been with you for a long time. Someone who knows everything about you." Elon's mind raced. Someone inside the company? It made sense in a way. SpaceX had been his life for over 2 decades, and over the years, he had let people into his world, people he trusted. But could one of them be involved in something so dangerous, so covert? The possibility made his blood run cold. "I don't know who to trust anymore," Elon said quietly, his eyes scanning the cryptic message again. "This feels personal." "I know," Gwen replied, "but you need to be careful. Whoever is behind this is playing a long game. They know your every move. And this isn't just about the company anymore. This is about you. They want you to take a step, Elon. They want you to make a choice." Elon stared at the tablet for a long moment. The words on the screen felt like a heavy weight, pressing down on him. But something else was gnawing at him too, the symbol. It looked so familiar, but he couldn't place where he'd seen it before. "Where did you find this?" Elon asked, his voice urgent. "We traced it back to an anonymous server. But the symbol, we've seen it before. It's tied to a group, an old organization. We think it's been operating in the shadows for years, even decades. They have connections all over the world, in tech, in government, in business. They're the ones pulling the strings." Elon's mind spun. An old organization? Pulling the strings? He had always suspected that there were hidden forces at play, but this was something entirely different, something he wasn't prepared for. "I need to see more," Elon said, his voice firm. "Get me everything you can on this symbol, this organization. I need answers." Gwen nodded, but there was a hesitation in her eyes. "Elon, I know you're determined to get to the bottom of this, but you have to be careful. This isn't just a tech breach anymore. This is something much bigger, and if you're not careful, you could end up putting yourself and everything you've built in danger." Elon paused, taking a deep breath. He had never been one to shy away from danger. He thrived on it. But the stakes were higher now. This wasn't just about innovation and progress anymore. This was about survival. And if what Gwen was suggesting was true, the people behind this could be far more powerful than anyone he had ever faced. "I don't have time to be careful," Elon said, his voice cold with resolve. "I need to know who's behind this, and I need to know why they're coming for me." Gwen looked at him for a long moment before speaking again. "We'll get the answers, Elon, but we need to move fast. This is bigger than anything you've faced before." As she left the room, Elon stared at the symbol on the tablet, feeling a growing sense of dread. The world he had built, the companies, the rockets, the dreams, was all about to be tested in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. And the countdown, he realized, wasn't just some distant concept. It had already started. The question now was, What would he do when it reached zero? The stakes are raised as Elon uncovers a shocking message that ties into a much larger, secretive organization. The mystery deepens, and Elon realizes he is at the center of something far more dangerous than he ever anticipated. Elon didn't sleep that night. The symbol from the message, the one he couldn't shake from his mind, kept appearing in his thoughts, like a puzzle he couldn't solve. Every time he closed his eyes, it was there, shifting and morphing, as though it was trying to communicate something to him, something he was just on the verge of understanding. But every time he reached for it, it slipped through his fingers. He couldn't focus. The knowledge that someone was watching him, waiting for him to make a choice, gnawed at him. This wasn't just a tech breach anymore. This was about his entire existence. The organization behind it all. Who were they? Why had they chosen him? Elon felt the walls closing in on him, a pressure building in his chest. He had always been in control, always the one calling the shots. But now, he wasn't so sure. The message from the anonymous source had rattled him in ways he couldn't explain. His gut told him that the boys at Taco Bell weren't just warning him. They were preparing him for something far greater, something he hadn't yet fully grasped. The next morning, he called a meeting with Gwyn and his closest advisors at SpaceX. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. The clock was ticking, and the stakes were higher than ever. As the team assembled in the conference room, the tension was palpable. Everyone was on edge, and it wasn't just because of the breach. It was the secrecy, the unknown threat that hung in the air like a storm cloud. Elon stood at the head of the table, his mind racing as he prepared to lay out everything he knew. "We've been compromised," Elon began, his voice steady but carrying an edge of urgency. "Someone inside the company is involved, and whoever they are, they're connected to a larger network. This isn't just a security breach, it's a coordinated attack." Gwyn nodded, her face grim. "We've been going through the logs. We found a pattern. Whoever's behind this has been laying the groundwork for years, Elon. They've infiltrated our systems, our personnel. They've been watching us, waiting." Elon's eyes narrowed. "Waiting for what?" "We don't know," she admitted. "But we do know one thing. They want you, and they want something from you." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Elon felt his heart rate quicken. He had never been one to shy away from challenges, but this was different. The question wasn't just about business or technology anymore. It was about his life. "What's their next move?" he asked, the steel in his voice unmistakable. "We don't know yet," Gwyn said, her tone filled with uncertainty. "But we found something. A trace. It's linked to an old organization, a shadow group that's been operating in secret for decades. They have influence all over the world, in politics, in business, in technology. They're powerful, Elon. And they're connected to something bigger than anything we've encountered." Elon's mind reeled. Bigger than anything we've encountered. He couldn't help but wonder if this was what the boys had meant when they said, "You're part of something bigger." Was he already tangled in a web that he couldn't escape? "What are they after?" Elon asked, almost to himself. Gwyn paused, choosing her words carefully. "We think they want you to join them, to align with their cause. They see you as a key player in their plans." Elon shook his head, disbelief mixing with a growing sense of fear. "I've built everything from the ground up. I've fought for what I believe in, and I'm not about to hand that over to some shadow group." "I know," Gwyn said softly, "but they're not asking. They're demanding. And they have the power to make you or break you." Elon's mind raced. The boys at Taco Bell had warned him, but he hadn't understood the full weight of their words until now. It was clear, this wasn't about technology or innovation. This was a fight for his freedom, his identity. Whoever was behind this had a plan, and they were willing to do whatever it took to execute it. But there was a problem. Elon wasn't just going to roll over and give up. He wasn't built that way. He wasn't just some pawn in someone else's game. If they thought they could control him, they were gravely mistaken. "We need to find them," Elon said, his voice resolute. "We need to know who's pulling the strings before they can make their next move." Gwyn's expression hardened. "We will. But we need to be careful. Whoever these people are, they've been planning this for years. They won't hesitate to take us down if we get too close." Elon nodded, his mind already working on a plan. He wasn't going to let this shadow organization dictate the course of his future. He would face them head-on, no matter what it took. The meeting ended, but Elon remained in the conference room long after everyone else had left. He stared out the window, lost in thought. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. He was on the edge of something big, something that could change everything. And the choices he made from here on out would determine whether he would rise above it or be swallowed by the darkness that threatened to consume him. The countdown was ticking. There was no turning back. Elon realizes the depth of the conspiracy surrounding him and begins to prepare for the confrontation ahead. The stakes are higher than ever, and the pressure is mounting as he faces the reality of being part of something much bigger than himself. The hours after the meeting felt like a blur of frantic action. Elon had always been a man of action, but now there was an urgency in his every move. The weight of the situation was suffocating, and every decision he made felt like it was setting him on a path with no return. But one thing was clear: he couldn't back down. Gwyn's warning echoed in his mind. Be careful, Elon. Whoever is behind this is playing a long game. But caution wasn't in his nature. He needed to take the offensive. Elon pulled up the encrypted files that had been sent to him the night before. The symbol from the message still haunted him, taunting him with its mystery. He ran his fingers over the design again, trying to make sense of it. The symbol had to mean something. Everything had a meaning. He didn't believe in coincidences, especially not now. If there was one thing he'd learned in his life, it was that every puzzle had a solution and every opponent had a weakness. He called a meeting with his top security experts and gathered his inner circle in a private room at SpaceX. We need to get to the bottom of this, Elon said, his voice sharp with determination. I want to know who's behind this, and I want answers fast. We can't afford to wait any longer. Gwyn, standing by his side, added, We've been tracing the symbols and messages. We think we've identified a pattern, but we need to move carefully. These people are professionals. They have resources, and they've been planning this for a long time. We don't have time for caution anymore, Elon shot back, his eyes hard with resolve. This isn't just a breach of our security. This is an attack on everything I've built. I will not let it slide. We're going after them. The team nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Elon had never been one to take a back seat in a crisis, and now, more than ever, it was clear that he was about to put everything on the line. As the group went over the plans, Elon's mind wandered back to the Taco Bell incident. It felt like it had happened in another lifetime, but the boy's words were still fresh in his mind. Things you might not be ready for. It was clear now. Those boys hadn't just been speaking in riddles. They'd been giving him a warning. A warning about the web of influence that stretched far beyond anything he had imagined. We've traced the origins of the symbol, Gwyn said, interrupting his thoughts. It's connected to an old organization, an elite group that's been operating behind the scenes for decades. They've infiltrated key sectors: business, tech, government. This is bigger than anything we've faced. Elon's eyes hardened. Bigger than anything we've faced. That phrase had stuck with him. Whoever these people were, they had been hiding in the shadows, working their way into the heart of every system, every company. They were silent, but their reach was everywhere. We have to stop them before they get to us, Elon said, his voice low but filled with a dangerous calm. I need to know everything about them, every detail, every connection. Gwyn glanced at the others in the room. We've made some progress. We've identified several key players within the organization, but their network is vast. They have people everywhere. If we move too quickly, we risk exposing ourselves to retaliation. These are people who don't hesitate to eliminate threats. Elon understood the danger all too well. But this wasn't about playing it safe anymore. This was about survival. If he didn't act, he wouldn't just lose control of SpaceX. He'd lose everything. Then we move carefully, but we move, Elon said firmly. No more waiting. The plan was set into motion. For the next few days, the team worked around the clock, digging deeper into the organization, tracking down leads, and attempting to uncover more information about their true intentions. But each time they thought they were getting closer to an answer, the trail would go cold, leaving them back at square one. It wasn't just a game of hide and seek. It was a game of manipulation. Whoever was behind this was controlling the narrative, dictating every move. And Elon wasn't sure how much longer he could stay one step ahead. Late one night, as Elon reviewed yet another string of encrypted messages, he received an unexpected visitor. It was a face he hadn't seen in years, someone from his past, someone he hadn't thought about in a long time. He looked up in surprise as the door to his office creaked open. "Elon," a familiar voice said. "It's been a long time." Elon froze. The voice was unmistakable. "Tyler," Elon said quietly, standing up, "what are you doing here?" Tyler, his old friend, former mentor, and one of the few people Elon had ever truly trusted, stepped into the room, his eyes full of both regret and urgency. "I never wanted to be part of this, Elon, but now it's too late. They're coming for you, and they're coming for all of us." Elon's pulse quickened. "They're coming for all of us." Those words sent a chill down his spine. Tyler had always been an insider, a man who knew how to navigate the murky waters of the corporate world. If he was here, it meant something had gone terribly wrong. "What do you know about them?" Elon demanded, stepping closer. "Who are they, and what do they want from me?" Tyler swallowed hard. "I can't explain everything, but I can tell you this. They want you to make a choice, and you won't be able to run from it. No one gets out once they're in." Elon felt a pang of dread, but his mind was already racing. He'd been prepared for the risks that came with ambition, but this was beyond anything he had ever anticipated. And yet, deep down, he knew he couldn't stop now. Too much was at stake. "We're in this together," Elon said, his voice grim, "and we'll fight back. But we need to know everything. Now." Tyler hesitated for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll tell you what I know. But once you hear it, there's no going back." Elon's eyes locked onto his, resolute. "I'm ready." Elon makes the decision to fight back against the mysterious organization, but the truth becomes even more complicated as a figure from his past steps forward with warnings of an impending choice. The stakes are higher than ever as Elon moves deeper into dangerous territory, unsure of what the consequences might be. Tyler's words echoed in Elon's mind long after the meeting had ended. "Once you're in, there's no going back." It was the weight of those words, combined with the fear in Tyler's eyes, that left Elon feeling more uncertain than ever. Whatever this organization was, it wasn't just a faceless corporation or shadowy figures pulling strings behind closed doors. It was something personal, something that had been watching him for much longer than he had ever suspected. The days after Tyler's warning were a whirlwind of preparation. Elon had always been a step ahead, a visionary, but this time he wasn't sure how to handle the unknown forces closing in on him. Every lead they tracked down seemed to lead to more questions, and every answer seemed to bring more danger. Elon spent hours poring over old files, messages, and intel, trying to piece together the puzzle. He called in his most trusted advisors, including Gwyn and some of the top security experts, to help analyze everything they had gathered so far. They had identified several key players within the organization, but the deeper they went, the more elusive it became. "We've got something," Gwyn said one morning, her face grim as she entered his office with a folder. "We've traced one of the symbols we've been following. It leads to an old, nearly defunct tech company. They were supposed to have dissolved decades ago, but it seems they were operating in secret." Elon raised an eyebrow. "A ghost company?" "Not just any ghost company," she replied. "A company with ties to some of the most influential people in the world. Politicians, tech giants, business moguls. They've been operating in the shadows, controlling information, directing global events without anyone knowing." Elon felt a surge of unease. He had always known that the world was full of hidden power structures, but this was something else entirely. Whoever was behind this organization had been planning for years, maybe even decades, to shape the future, and now they had their eyes on him. "I don't understand," Elon said, his voice low. "Why me? What do they want from me?" Gwyn shook her head. "We don't know yet, but it's clear they've been following your every move for a long time. They see you as a player in their game, Elon, a key piece, and they're not going to stop until they get what they want." Elon ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. "This isn't just about me. This is about everything. SpaceX, Tesla, everything I've built. If they're involved in this, They've got power we can't even begin to understand. As the day wore on, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Every day that passed brought him closer to a decision he didn't want to make. The organization's shadow loomed larger over his life, threatening to consume everything he had worked for. That night, he sat in his office long after everyone else had left, staring out the window at the sprawling city below. He had built empires, revolutionized industries, and reshaped the future of humanity. But now, for the first time in his life, he didn't know if he could control the forces gathering against him. A knock on the door snapped him from his thoughts. He turned to see Gwen standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "There's something you need to see," she said, stepping into the room and handing him a tablet. "We've intercepted another message. It's addressed to you." Elon took the tablet and, with a growing sense of dread, watched as the screen flickered to life. The message was brief, but the words burned into his mind like a brand. "You are the key. We've been waiting for you. Come to the designated location. If you refuse, the consequences will be severe. The time has come for you to choose." The words seemed to hang in the air, suffocating him with their weight. He had been warned over and over again that this moment would come. The choice. The point of no return. He didn't need to ask Gwen if the location was legitimate. The fear in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. Whoever these people were, they weren't playing games anymore. And neither was he. "Do we have a choice?" Elon asked, his voice barely a whisper. Gwen's face tightened. "Not really. We either go, or we risk them taking everything from us." Elon stood up from his desk, his mind racing. This was it, the moment he'd been dreading. He knew he couldn't avoid the confrontation any longer. He had to face these people, to find out who they were and what they wanted from him. But the question remained. What would he have to sacrifice to get answers? "This ends tonight," Elon said, his voice filled with determination. "Prepare the team. We're going to find out what they want, and we're going to take back control." The decision had been made. There would be no more running, no more waiting. It was time to confront the organization head-on. Whatever happened next, Elon Musk was ready. The threat grows ever more real as Elon receives a direct message from the mysterious organization, forcing him to face the reality that his world is now under their control. The time for preparation is over. The confrontation is imminent. The following day, a sense of urgency gripped Elon. He couldn't afford to waste time second-guessing. This was his moment, his only shot at getting answers. The symbol, the cryptic messages, the shadowy figures lurking in the background. They were all converging to this one point. He had always prided himself on being a step ahead, but now, as he prepared for the meeting, he realized that the people behind this conspiracy were experts in manipulating power. They didn't just want to meet him, they wanted to control him. Elon, Gwen, and a select few from his inner circle were ready to make the dangerous journey to the location specified in the message. The place was isolated, deep in the heart of the Nevada desert, away from prying eyes. It was the kind of place no one would ever think to look. Gwen had already arranged for a small fleet of private jets, ready to fly them in. The plan was simple: get in, gather intel, and get out. But even as he formulated the plan, Elon could feel the weight of uncertainty in his gut. He had never been in a situation like this before. The stakes were no longer just about business or innovation, they were about his very survival. They arrived in the desert, the hot, dry air wrapping around them like a suffocating blanket. The landscape was barren, a stark contrast to the world of technology and progress that Elon was used to. The setting felt like a metaphor for the situation itself, isolated, remote, and dangerously unpredictable. As the group gathered near the designated meeting point, a series of abandoned warehouses hidden among the cliffs, Elon felt his pulse quicken. They were about to face something monumental, and he couldn't help but wonder if he was walking into a trap. "We don't have much time," Gwen said, her voice low as she checked her watch. "The message said they'll be expecting us. We need to stay sharp." Elon nodded, trying to calm the uneasy feeling gnawing at him. He could almost hear the echo of the boy's words from Taco Bell, things you might not be ready for. What were they trying to tell him? Had they known all along that this moment was coming? Or was it a warning about something even bigger than he realized? His thoughts were interrupted by a sound, a low rumble, like a distant engine. A black SUV appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust as it approached their location. Elon's heart rate increased. This was it. The vehicle stopped a few feet away, and out of the car stepped a tall, imposing figure, dressed in black, with a calm demeanor that sent a shiver down Elon's spine. It was a man who exuded authority without saying a word, someone who clearly didn't fear anything. "Mr. Musk," the man said, his voice smooth and unhurried. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you." Elon studied him carefully, sizing him up. There was something familiar about him, but he couldn't place it. His gut told him this was someone who had been in the shadows for a long time, pulling strings, orchestrating events from behind the curtain. "I'm not here for pleasantries," Elon said, his voice sharp. "I want answers. Who are you, and what do you want with me?" The man smiled faintly, almost as if he'd been expecting this reaction. "Straight to the point, I see. Very well. I'll give you the answers you seek, Mr. Musk. But first, I want you to understand one thing. You are a part of something much bigger than yourself. And whether you accept it or not, your fate is tied to ours now." Elon's grip tightened around the edge of the table he was standing next to. "You're not telling me anything new. I've known that for a while. What I need to know is why." The man's smile faded. He took a slow step forward, his eyes locking onto Elon's. "Because you're the key. The choices you make from here on out will shape the future. And whether you like it or not, we need you to make the right one." A cold chill ran through Elon's spine. He had heard the word key before, at Taco Bell, whispered by the boys. Was this all connected? Before he could respond, the man spoke again, his tone no longer friendly but commanding. "You may think you're in control, Musk, but you're not. We've been watching you for a long time. Every move you've made, every decision. And now, you're at a crossroads. You can either help us shape the world as we see fit, or you can fight us, and we will destroy everything you've built." Elon's pulse raced. The man's words were like a shot to the heart, cold, ruthless, but oddly compelling. He was trying to intimidate him, no doubt, but Elon Musk wasn't someone who cowered in fear. He had built empires, faced down countless obstacles, and overcome challenges that seemed impossible. But this was different. "And if I refuse?" Elon asked, his voice steady, despite the swirling chaos in his mind. The man didn't flinch. "You'll lose everything. Your companies, your reputation, your legacy. We control the narrative, Mr. Musk. You don't get to choose." For a moment, the desert air felt suffocating. Elon felt the weight of the man's words pressing down on him. The organization wasn't just a threat to his business. It was a threat to everything he had worked for, everything he believed in. Gwen stepped forward, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "What do you want from him?" she asked, her voice unwavering. The man turned his attention to her, his gaze cold. "It's not about what we want from him, Miss Shotwell. It's about what we all need to do together. This is bigger than all of us. The question is, will you stand with us, or will you fall against us?" Elon didn't know whether to fight or to give in. His mind was racing, his heart pounding in his chest. This was the moment that would define his future. Whatever choice he made, it would change everything. The first real confrontation with the mysterious organization takes place. Elon is forced to face the daunting truth. He is now at the mercy of powerful forces that want to control the future. The stakes are higher than ever as he realizes the full scope of what he's up against. Will he fight back, or will he give in to the pressure? Elon stood still, his mind racing. The man before him, this enigmatic figure who had appeared from the shadows, seemed to know more about him than he did about himself. The cold, calculated manner in which he spoke sent a chill down his spine, but it was the weight of the words, the sheer power behind them, that made Elon's pulse quicken. "You can either help us shape the future," the man had said, "or you can fight us, and we will destroy everything you've built." Destroy everything. The words lingered in the air, haunting him. In an instant, everything he had worked for, his companies, his vision, the legacy he had spent a lifetime building, could be wiped away. The enormity of the situation was almost too much to bear. Gwen stood beside him, her jaw clenched, Her eyes narrowed in determination. "We're not afraid of you," she said, her voice unwavering despite the tension in the air. "We've faced threats before, and we've always come out on top." The man's lips curled into a faint smile. "Oh, I know you have. But this time, it's different. You're not just facing competitors. You're facing forces that control the very fabric of the world." Elon turned his head slightly to look at her. She was right to be confident, but something in the man's eyes told him that this wasn't a normal battle. Whoever they were dealing with had access to power beyond anything he had ever encountered. "What do you want from me?" Elon asked, his voice quieter now, the anger of the moment giving way to a more cautious curiosity. The man's gaze softened, almost as if he was finally offering Elon a glimpse of the truth. "It's simple, really. We need you to be a part of something bigger, something that transcends the constraints of the current system. You're the one who can bring our vision to life." Elon felt a stir of resistance, but it was overshadowed by the growing realization that this was no longer a simple business rivalry. They weren't asking for partnership, they were demanding control. "You want me to join you," he said, the question hanging in the air. "What's in it for me?" The man's eyes gleamed with an almost eerie certainty. "What's in it for you is the chance to shape the future on your terms, to transcend the petty limitations that the current systems have imposed on all of us. Together, we can make the impossible a reality." It was tempting in a way. Elon had always pushed the boundaries of possibility, whether it was with electric cars, rockets, or artificial intelligence. But this felt like something darker, something more dangerous. He had always believed that humanity's future was something that could be achieved through innovation, hard work, and ethical leadership. But now, it seemed that the very forces he had fought against were offering him a seat at their table, promising him access to an even greater kind of power. "You can't seriously expect me to just fall in line with this," Elon said, his voice now cold, his hands clenched into fists. "You want me to throw everything I've built away and join your twisted game. You're asking me to betray my values, my principles." The man didn't flinch. "It's not a betrayal, Elon. It's evolution. The world is changing. You can either fight it, or you can lead it." There was no mistaking the underlying thread in his words. They were offering him the chance to become a leader of a new world order, an order built on secrecy, manipulation, and control. They were offering him everything he had ever dreamed of, but at what cost? "What are you really asking for?" Elon pressed, his voice steady, but the tension in his body growing. He wasn't going to be pushed into a decision without knowing exactly what they were offering. The man's expression hardened, and for a moment, Elon saw the true depth of the power behind his words. "What we're asking for is simple," the man said, his voice low and deliberate. "We want your cooperation, your influence. We want you to use everything you've built to further our vision. In exchange, you'll get access to the resources, networks, and technology that will allow you to take your work further than you ever thought possible." It was an offer that sounded too good to be true. Elon had always been driven by a desire to change the world, to push humanity forward. But this was different. The price of this kind of power wasn't something he was willing to pay. "You think I'd sacrifice everything I believe in for power and control?" Elon asked, his voice hardening with resolve. "You've miscalculated." The man's gaze flickered, but only for a moment. Then he sighed, almost as if he was disappointed. "It's always the same with you people. You think you can change the world by playing by the rules. But there are no rules here, Mr. Musk. Not anymore. This is the world we live in now. The question is, do you want to be a part of it or be left behind?" The silence that followed was suffocating. Elon could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him. The man's words were like a warning bell ringing in his ears. There was no easy way out of this. "I'm not interested in being part of your world," Elon said, his voice calm but filled with unshakable conviction. "I'll make my own way. You'll regret this." The man didn't react immediately. He merely stood there for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he took in Elon's words. Then, slowly, he spoke. "Very well. If you refuse, you'll regret it sooner than you think." He turned and signaled for his men, who were waiting nearby. "But don't say I didn't warn you." As the man walked away, Elon felt the weight of the moment settle over him. The choice had been made. He had refused their offer, but in doing so, he had stepped into a battle unlike any he had faced before. The organization would stop at nothing to get what they wanted, and Elon knew that this was just the beginning. Elon makes his choice. He refuses to join the shadowy organization and their vision for the future. The confrontation leaves him with the unsettling knowledge that he has now made himself their enemy. The stakes are higher than ever as Elon steps into the unknown, knowing that he will need to fight harder than ever to protect everything he has built. The desert sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the barren landscape as Elon watched the black SUV disappear into the distance. The confrontation had ended, but something in the air felt far from resolved. The man's warning echoed in his mind, and as the minutes ticked by, a gnawing sense of dread settled over him. "They won't stop," Elon muttered under his breath. Gwen stepped closer, her expression unreadable, but her posture tense. "You know they won't. They're not the kind of people to walk away after being turned down. This is just the beginning, Elon." Elon's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. The decision he'd made was final, but it hadn't come without a cost. Refusing their offer was like flipping a switch, and now the fight was on. But how could he fight an enemy that operated in the shadows? How could he prepare for something so invisible, so far-reaching? "Then we need to get ahead of them," Elon said, his voice low but firm. "We can't wait for them to make the next move. We have to act fast." Gwen nodded. She had been by his side through countless challenges, and though she could never fully understand the scope of what he was dealing with, she knew him well enough to understand the gravity of the situation. "What's the plan?" Elon turned to face her, his eyes steely with resolve. "We need to go underground. We'll use the resources we have, but we can't let anyone track us. Not even our closest allies. This is bigger than just us. It's about protecting everything." He wasn't just talking about his businesses anymore. His entire world. The empire he had built, his family, and the legacy he had worked so tirelessly to create was at risk. This wasn't just a corporate rivalry. This was a battle for control, not only of the present but of the future itself. Over the next few days, the world outside seemed to fade away as Elon and his team plunged into a whirlwind of secrecy. He used encrypted channels, secure locations, and the vast web of trusted contacts he had built over the years. His usual public life, filled with media appearances, speeches, and board meetings, was replaced with clandestine planning and strategy. Every move was calculated, every decision weighed carefully. The organization's reach was vast, too vast to underestimate. Elon had always been a man of progress, a visionary, but now he found himself in a position where even his greatest innovations might not be enough to protect him. The rules had changed, and he had to adapt, or else risk losing everything. It wasn't just business anymore. It was survival. The team worked tirelessly, setting up safe houses, creating backup plans, and securing private channels of communication. There was no room for mistakes. One slip-up, one leak, and they would all be exposed. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. Elon barely slept, his mind constantly racing, trying to predict the organization's next move. Were they already watching him? Was there someone on the inside, feeding them information? He couldn't trust anyone outside his inner circle. Not anymore. Then, just as the situation seemed to reach a boiling point, an unexpected visitor arrived at one of their safe houses. A woman, dressed in a sharp suit, with dark sunglasses and an air of quiet authority, stepped into the room. Her presence was commanding, and despite the tension in the air, there was a sense of familiarity about her. "Elon," she said, her voice calm but intense. "We need to talk." Gwen's posture immediately shifted, alert and cautious. She had no idea who this woman was, but the instant she saw the tension in Elon's eyes, she understood that this was no ordinary visitor. Elon studied the woman carefully, his eyes narrowing. "Who are you?" She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes that were sharp, calculating, but not without a trace of something else, something personal. "I'm someone who can help, and I'm also someone you should have trusted a long time ago." Elon's heart skipped a beat. There was something unnerving about her words, but also something familiar. This wasn't a random ally, not someone he'd just met. This woman knew him. But how? What do you mean, trusted? Elon asked, his voice low, his mind racing to put the pieces together. The woman smiled faintly. I've been following you for a while, Elon. I've seen what you've built, and I've seen what's coming. But what you don't realize is that you're not the only one being hunted. Elon felt a flicker of unease. Who else is involved? She stepped forward, lowering her voice. The organization you're dealing with isn't just interested in you. They have their sights on other people, too. Powerful people. People who can change the world in ways you can't even imagine. Gwyn shot Elon a wary glance. What are you saying? You're not one of them, are you? The woman held up a hand, silencing the room. I'm not with them, but I know their game. And I know that you can't win this battle alone. You need allies who are already in the fight, people who have the resources and the knowledge to take them down. Elon's mind whirred. He'd always been a lone wolf in many ways, but this wasn't a battle that could be fought alone. If what she said was true, he was facing forces that were too big to take on without help. What do you want from me? Elon asked, the weight of the decision looming over him. I want you to join forces, she said. We have the technology, the intelligence, and the network to stop them. But we can't do it without you. The room fell silent as Elon processed her words. He had always been someone who trusted his instincts, and right now, they were telling him that this was an offer he couldn't afford to refuse. All right, he said finally, his voice steady. We'll do it. But if you're playing me, I'll make sure you regret it. The woman's smile didn't waver. You won't regret it, Elon, but you will need to trust me. Because if we fail, there will be no coming back. Elon realizes that the threat he's facing is much larger than he anticipated, and his only chance of survival lies in forming an unexpected alliance. The stakes grow higher as he decides to put his trust in a mysterious ally, someone who might hold the key to taking down the organization. The battle for control has become even more complex and more dangerous. The air inside the safe house was thick with tension. Elon sat across from the woman. Her name, as it turned out, was Isabel. She had been working in the shadows for years, tracking the movements of the organization and uncovering secrets that even Elon had never imagined. But trust was a fragile thing. Elon couldn't afford to let his guard down, not even for a second. So, Elon began, his voice steady but filled with suspicion. You've been following me for years? Why? Isabel leaned back, her sharp eyes never leaving his. Because I knew you were the one who could make the difference. I've seen what you've done with Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink. You've changed the game every time you've entered it. But I also knew that sooner or later, you'd be targeted. Elon remained silent for a moment, considering her words. It was true. He had always pushed boundaries, always sought to create something bigger than himself. But the fact that someone like Isabel had been watching him, without ever revealing herself, made him uneasy. Why didn't you reach out sooner? Gwyn's voice cut through the silence. She had been observing Isabel just as closely, her protective instincts kicking in. If you knew this was coming, why let it get to this point? Isabel's gaze flickered, and for the first time, a hint of vulnerability showed. Because I couldn't. I needed to be sure. I needed to know you were ready. Elon's eyes narrowed. Ready for what? To fight back. To understand that this isn't a battle you can win by yourself. That's why I'm here. Isabel's voice dropped, becoming more intense. What you're up against isn't just a corporation. It's a network. A web of power that reaches everywhere, from politics to finance, technology to military. They've infiltrated every sector, and they've been playing the long game for decades. They don't just want control, they want to reshape the world in their image. Elon leaned forward, his interest piqued despite the growing unease. How do you know all this? What exactly are they planning? Isabel hesitated, then slid a tablet across the table. The screen flickered to life, displaying a series of encrypted files, graphs, and images that Elon recognized instantly. There were blueprints for projects he had worked on, leaked communications between major global figures, and something that caught his attention, plans for a new kind of AI, one that could control not just information, but entire economies. This, Isabel said quietly, is just the tip of the iceberg. They're creating a system that will not only monitor and control everything, It will predict and manipulate human behavior on a global scale. Elon felt a chill run down his spine. He had always been wary of AI's potential dangers, but this was a level of manipulation that went beyond anything he had ever imagined. Whoever was behind this was playing a game that Elon wasn't sure he could win. Gwen looked at the tablet, her face darkening. This is monstrous. It is, Isabel agreed. And if we don't act fast, it will be too late. They've already started deploying their prototypes in key industries. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, it will be impossible to stop. Elon felt a surge of anger and determination. He had always believed that technology should be used to empower humanity, to make the world better. But this was a perversion of everything he stood for. He couldn't let them win. We need to find out who's behind this, Elon said, his voice cold with resolve. We need to stop them before it's too late. Isabel nodded. I've already started working on that. But we can't do it alone. We need allies, people who are already in positions of power, people who know how to take down this kind of system. Elon's mind raced. He had always been the one to lead the charge, to find the answers. But this was bigger than him. Much bigger. Who do you have in mind? Isabel hesitated before responding. There are a few key figures who might be able to help. People who have had their own run-ins with the organization, people who have their own reasons for wanting to see it destroyed. But we need to be careful. If they suspect we're onto them, it'll be the end of us. Elon looked at Gwen, his mind already working through the implications. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about something far more important, the future of humanity. He had no choice but to move forward, even if it meant trusting people he didn't fully know. We'll do whatever it takes, Elon said, his voice resolute. We can't let them control the future. Isabel's gaze softened, a flicker of respect crossing her face. That's what I wanted to hear. You're not just thinking about yourself anymore. That's the difference between someone who wants to change the world and someone who wants to own it. The room fell into silence as the weight of the decision settled over them. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for control of the future. And the battle was just beginning. As Elon looked out the window, he couldn't shake the feeling that the world as he knew it was slipping away, and that everything he had worked for, every breakthrough, every challenge, was now part of a larger, more dangerous game. Elon and Gwen learn more about the organization's true scope, and Elon is forced to face the gravity of the situation. Isabel's revelation that the organization controls far more than he initially believed deepens the stakes. The fight is no longer just about survival. It's about the future of humanity. Elon must now rely on others to take down the powerful network threatening to reshape the world. The dimly lit room hummed with the low buzz of high-tech equipment. Screens flickered, displaying real-time data, encrypted communications, and news feeds that were carefully monitored. It had been only a few days since Elon and his team decided to trust Isabel, but already they were diving into the heart of the operation. The weight of the decision had not escaped Elon. Each move they made from here on out would be under constant scrutiny, and any wrong step could cost them everything. The risk was high, but the need for action was greater. The organization wasn't waiting, and neither could they. I've got something, Gwen said, breaking the silence. She was seated at one of the computers, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she accessed a series of confidential files. Elon's attention snapped to her. What is it? Gwen's face hardened as she scanned the information on the screen. This is bigger than we thought. I've found evidence of their operations in at least 5 countries. They're positioning themselves in tech, finance, even energy sectors. Everything we're working on, Elon. Elon clenched his jaw. The scale of what they were up against was starting to sink in. This wasn't a small group of individuals or a corporate rivalry. It was an international network with tentacles in every major industry. The sheer reach of their power was overwhelming. We have to shut them down, Elon said, his voice laced with determination. But we can't go in blind. We need intel. We need to know their next move. Isabel, who had been standing silently in the corner of the room, spoke up. I've been tracking their activities for years. But what I've learned is that their plans change constantly. They'll expect us to make a move, and they'll have prepared for it. That's why we need to stay one step ahead. Elon nodded. Then we need to act fast. We can't let them anticipate our every move. Gwen looked up from the screen, a mix of urgency and concern on her face. There's an encrypted communication network they've been using. If we can access it, we might be able to get ahead of them. But it's not going to be easy. These systems are nearly impossible to crack. Elon didn't hesitate. Then we break it. The plan was set in motion almost immediately. They needed to infiltrate the organization's communication system. A risky move, but one that could provide the critical information they needed to gain an advantage. Gwen, Isabel, and a handful of trusted operatives worked together to assemble a team of elite hackers and cybersecurity experts. Elon, however, knew that no matter how skilled they were, the risks remained. "We can't afford any mistakes," Elon said, his voice steady but filled with gravity. "If we do this, we go all in. No turning back." As the team prepared to launch their cyber attack, Elon's mind kept racing. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place, but with each new revelation came more questions. Who were the key players behind the organization? Why had they targeted him? What was their ultimate goal? The answers, it seemed, were just out of reach. The operation began. Gwen, Isabel, and the rest of the team worked in sync, bypassing layers of encryption and security firewalls. The tension in the room was palpable, each second that passed feeling like an eternity. Elon paced nervously, his mind on overdrive. They were on the verge of something monumental, something that could change everything. "I've got it," Gwen said, breaking the silence. Her voice was a mixture of relief and triumph. "We're in." On the screen before her, a series of encrypted messages and files unlocked, revealing a web of confidential communications between high-ranking members of the organization. For the first time, they were seeing the full scope of the operation, and it was even more dangerous than they had feared. "Elon, you need to see this," Gwen said, turning the screen toward him. Elon stepped forward, his eyes scanning the data. He quickly realized that the organization was planning a massive global operation, a coordinated series of economic moves that would destabilize entire industries, cause widespread panic, and allow them to seize control of crucial resources. The magnitude of their plan was staggering. It's going to affect the entire world," Elon said, his voice a low murmur. "We have to stop them before they can execute this." But just as the team was starting to process the full scale of the operation, something unexpected happened. A sudden alarm blared throughout the room. It was followed by a series of frantic beeps and flashing red lights. "Something's wrong," Isabel said, her voice sharp. "They're onto us." Elon's heart sank. He knew exactly what that meant. The organization had a vast network of countermeasures, and they just triggered one of them. The moment they accessed the encrypted files, they had alerted the enemy. "We need to get out of here now," Elon barked, as the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. The team scrambled into action, shutting down the computers and securing their equipment. But Elon knew they couldn't stay in one place for long. The organization would be closing in fast. "Gwen, Isabel, get the team out of here," Elon said, his voice urgent. "I'll cover you." He knew this was the point of no return. There would be no time to regroup or plan. They were already in too deep. As they made their way toward the exit, the tension in the air grew thicker. Elon's mind raced through the options. Their next move had to be calculated, precise, and swift. One mistake, and it could all be over. And yet, amid the chaos, a sense of clarity washed over him. They had found something they could use against the organization. This was their chance to turn the tables. As they reached the exit and piled into the waiting cars, Elon looked back at the safe house one last time. It was no longer a sanctuary, it was a target. The enemy was coming for them. But in that moment, Elon realized something crucial. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future, and he wasn't going to let them take it. Elon and his team successfully infiltrate the organization's encrypted communications, uncovering a plan that could reshape the world. But their victory is short-lived as the organization quickly discovers their actions, forcing them to make a swift escape. The battle has now escalated to a dangerous new level, with Elon and his team fighting not just to survive, but to stop an unstoppable force. The car sped through the empty streets, the engine's roar echoing in the dead of night. Elon sat in the back seat, his mind whirling with the events of the past few hours. The safe house was no longer safe, and they couldn't risk staying in one place for long. Every second felt like an eternity, and the walls were closing in. Gwen, sitting in the front seat, glanced at Elon through the rearview mirror. Her face was grim, the weight of their situation sinking in. We need to think fast. They'll be tracking us, and if they get a sniff of our next move— Elon interrupted her, his voice calm but filled with urgency. We'll keep moving. No stops, no distractions. We need to get to a secure location and lay low for a while. Then, we plan our next step. Isabel, who had been quietly observing, leaned forward from the passenger seat. There's no time to rest. We've seen what they're capable of. If we stay in one place for too long, they'll find us. Elon nodded. Isabel's warnings were not lost on him. The organization had resources that were beyond what he had ever imagined. They were no longer just fighting an invisible enemy. They were facing a well-funded, well-organized force that could track their every move. Gwen turned onto a side street, taking a shortcut to a private compound that they had set up months ago, just in case things ever went sideways. It was isolated, secure, and the perfect place to regroup. As they arrived, Elon quickly stepped out of the car, his mind already focused on the next move. They didn't have much time. The operation they had uncovered, the organization's plan to destabilize industries and seize control, was too dangerous to let play out. But now, they had to figure out how to stop it without getting caught in the process. Inside the compound, the team quickly got to work. Computers hummed as hackers began running through the encrypted files they had stolen. Gwen and Isabel were deep in conversation, strategizing how to find out who was behind the organization's actions. Elon leaned over a table, staring at the wall of screens displaying maps, coded communications, and surveillance footage. He could feel the weight of every decision. There was no room for error, not this time. Gwen approached him, her eyes narrowed in concentration. I've identified a possible lead. One of the figures behind the operation is a high-ranking official, someone with connections to the financial sector. We need to find out more about him. Isabel joined them, her face set with resolve. I've got sources who can help us, but we need to move quickly. If this guy is as powerful as we think, he'll have layers of protection. We'll need to outsmart him. Elon turned to face her, his gaze intense. How do we do that? We don't just confront him head-on. We need to use his own systems against him. Get into his finances, trace his deals, dig up whatever dirt we can. And once we have leverage, we use it to expose him. We hit them where it hurts. Elon considered the plan. It was risky, but they didn't have many options. What's the first step? Isabel motioned to a laptop where a digital map of global financial transactions was displayed. We start here. I've got a backdoor into one of his accounts. If we can find a way into his encrypted files, we can trace his connections to the organization. As Gwen and Isabel delved into the details, Elon stepped away to collect his thoughts. He was used to the pressure, used to the long hours and endless challenges. But this was different. This wasn't just about innovation or competition. This was about survival, his, and the future of everything he had built. As the hours passed, the team worked tirelessly. Every moment felt like a countdown. Elon knew they were close, but there was something nagging at him, a feeling that they were missing something. Suddenly, Gwen looked up from her workstation, her face pale. Elon, we've got a problem. Elon immediately crossed the room, his heart rate picking up. What is it? Gwen turned the screen toward him, showing a series of encrypted messages from the organization. The content was chilling. They've found us, she said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. They've been tracking our communications. It's only a matter of time before they find this location. Elon's mind raced. They had to leave, and they had to leave now. Get the team together. We move out. We can't afford to stay here any longer. Isabel quickly grabbed her gear and handed it to the others. We've got a few escape routes, but they'll be watching every exit. We need to be smart. Fast. Gwen was already organizing the team's departure, but Elon couldn't shake the feeling that the organization was always one step ahead. The stakes had just been raised. There was no more room for mistakes. As they exited the compound, Elon's mind was already working through their next move. They couldn't just keep running. They needed to take the fight to the enemy. But how? How could they possibly go up against an adversary who controlled everything from the shadows? It was time to turn the tables. But the question remained. Could they outsmart an enemy that was everywhere? The tension heightens as Elon and his team race against time to uncover the organization's plans. Their safe haven is compromised, and they're forced to move quickly. With the enemy closing in, they must prepare for their next major move, to infiltrate the organization's financial network and expose the people behind it. But with every step, the danger grows, and the line between ally and enemy becomes more blurred. The air was thick with tension as Elon and his team moved swiftly through the alleyways, a sense of urgency pressing down on them. The escape from their last safe house had been nothing short of chaotic. They had narrowly avoided capture, but the organization was closing in. Every corner they turned felt like a trap waiting to spring. "Keep moving," Elon said, his voice low but firm. "We need to stay off the grid." Gwen was at his side, her eyes darting around, ever vigilant. "I've got eyes on the satellite feeds. The organization has gone dark, which means they know we're on the move. We can't trust any of our usual contacts." Isabel was ahead, leading the team through the maze of backstreets. "We need to get to the safe house in the city. It's the only place we can lay low without them tracking us immediately." Elon nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. The organization's network was vast. No matter where they went, there was a constant risk that they'd be found. He thought of the encrypted files they'd uncovered, the revelations that exposed the global reach of the group. They weren't just pulling strings in tech and finance. They had their hands in everything, from political maneuvering to military contracts. The full scope of their operation still boggled Elon's mind. If they weren't stopped, the consequences could be catastrophic. As they reached the new safe house, Elon quickly ushered everyone inside. They had no time to waste. The team needed a plan, something that would allow them to strike back without leaving a trail for the enemy to follow. "We're running out of time," Elon said, pacing the small, dimly lit room. "We can't keep hiding forever. We need to hit them where it hurts, make them feel the pressure." Gwen, who had been reviewing the financial data they had accessed, spoke up. "I've been going through the encrypted files again. I found a pattern. There's a series of high-profile events planned within the next few weeks, large investments, government contracts. The organization's leaders are preparing for something major." Elon stopped in his tracks. "If we can disrupt one of those events, stop one of those deals, we might be able to throw a wrench in their entire operation." Isabel's eyes narrowed. "But these aren't just small-time contracts. We're talking about multi-billion-dollar deals, some involving key government agencies and major corporations. If we go after one of them, it'll make us the #1 target." Gwen stepped forward, her expression serious. "That's why we need leverage. We can't just crash one of these deals and walk away. We need something that'll make the entire organization squirm." Elon considered the options. "We need to get to their leadership, find out who's pulling the strings. Without that, all we're doing is knocking down pieces without seeing the bigger picture." Isabel gave a short nod. "We've been going about this wrong. We've been trying to fight them head-on. Instead, we need to expose them publicly, put their name out there so they can't operate in the shadows anymore." Elon's eyes lit up as the idea clicked. "We go public. We leak everything we've found. Their plans, their identities, their operations, everything. No one will be able to ignore it." Gwen shook her head. "It's dangerous. If they catch wind of this before we're ready, they'll stop us. We're talking about pulling down an empire." "We don't have a choice," Elon said, his voice resolute. "If we don't act, they'll crush us. This is our only chance." The team gathered around, each member contemplating the enormity of the decision. The moment they went public, the risk would be sky-high. But they had already crossed the point of no return. They couldn't back down now. Gwen, always the strategist, began pulling up the necessary files. "We've got a window. We can leak the information through secure channels, make it public in a way that ties the organization to these global events. But it's going to take precision. If we're sloppy, we might as well sign our own death warrants." "I'll take care of the tech," Isabel said, already at work setting up secure communications. "I've got a way to get it into the hands of the right people. We'll make sure it gets out, but we'll also keep enough deniability that we can pull back if things go sideways." Elon ran a hand through his hair. All right, let's get this done. As the team set the plan into motion, Elon felt the weight of the decision pressing on him. They were risking everything: lives, careers, even the future of their companies. If they succeeded, they could expose the organization for the criminals they were. If they failed, they would be hunted down, and the organization would continue to operate unchecked. By the time the leak was ready, the room was charged with a quiet intensity. The final moment had arrived. Gwyn's voice broke through the stillness. It's done. Elon looked at the screens, his eyes scanning the encrypted communications that would soon go public. He took a deep breath, knowing there was no turning back now. Let's see how they react. The team gathered around as the information was sent to their trusted contacts, a network of journalists, government officials, and activists who would ensure the leak went global. As soon as it hit the wire, Elon knew that everything would change. They had just set a fire, and the organization was about to feel the heat. But just as they thought the worst was behind them, a chilling sound broke the silence. A loud crash. Then, the unmistakable sound of boots stomping through the door. Elon's heart skipped a beat. The enemy was already here. Elon and his team decided to go on the offensive, exposing the organization's plans and leadership to the world. But their bold move comes with extreme risk, and just as they prepare to go public, the enemy closes in, forcing them into an even more dangerous position. The stakes are higher than ever. Everything depends on whether the leak will reach the right people in time. The loud crash of the door being kicked and echoed through the small, safe house like a thunderclap. Elon's heart hammered in his chest. He barely had time to process what was happening before Gwyn grabbed his arm, pulling him into the corner of the room. "Get down," she hissed, her voice sharp, urgent. Elon dropped to the floor, his instincts kicking in. He could hear heavy footsteps, the unmistakable sound of men storming through the house, checking every room, every closet. They were here. The organization had found them. Isabel and the others were already scrambling to take cover, their faces tense with the knowledge that this could be the end of everything. The plan to expose the organization had barely gone live, and now their enemies were at their doorstep, prepared to make sure it never saw the light of day. Elon quickly scanned the room, trying to assess their options. The back window was their only escape route, but it was too risky to move. The enemy had already secured the front entrance. Then, the unmistakable voice of a man filtered through the chaos. "Elon Musk, we know you're here. Come out. This doesn't have to get messy." Elon's blood ran cold. They had him. He tried to steady his breath, his mind racing. Who was this man? The voice was familiar, but he couldn't place it. He had no idea how much the organization knew about their plans. They could have been tracking them for days, weeks, or even longer. Gwyn's whisper cut through the tension. "Don't engage. We need to stay quiet, stay hidden." But it was too late. A tall figure stepped into the doorway, his silhouette casting a long shadow across the room. The man was wearing black tactical gear, his face obscured by a mask, but the gleam in his eyes was unmistakable. "Elon," the figure said, his voice now a low, threatening growl. "You've made a mistake. You can't expose us. Not now. Not ever." Elon stayed still, his mind working furiously. If they didn't do something, they'd be captured, and all of their efforts would be for nothing. But the man's words, the sheer confidence in his tone, made Elon realize something terrifying. This was no random henchman. This was someone important. The figure took a step forward, his boots crunching on the floor. "I thought you were smarter than this. You've been playing in our world for too long, Elon. You didn't think we'd notice, did you? The leaks? The files? You didn't think we'd find a way to stop you?" Elon's pulse quickened. The reality of the situation hit him like a ton of bricks. This was the leader of the organization, the mastermind behind everything they had been fighting against. It all clicked into place: the cold efficiency, the calculated moves, the access to every corner of the globe. But there was one thing Elon knew for certain. He couldn't back down now. Suddenly, Isabel's voice rang out from the opposite side of the room. "You'll never stop us." The man turned toward the sound of her voice, and for just a split second, Elon saw the opportunity he needed. Without thinking, he surged forward. grabbing a nearby chair and throwing it across the room at the masked figure. The man's attention was momentarily diverted, and it was enough for the team to make their move. Gwen was the first to act, firing a warning shot from a concealed weapon she had hidden in her jacket. The bullet grazed the wall near the leader's head, making him flinch but not retreat. "Elon," Gwen shouted, urgency in her voice. "Get to the window. Go now." Elon didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted toward the back, his team covering him as best as they could. The window wasn't large, but it was their only way out. As he reached it, he turned to see Isabel and Gwen taking up defensive positions. "Come on," Gwen urged, her eyes scanning the room, watching for any movement. Elon clambered out of the window and dropped to the ground below, his legs barely able to keep him steady from the fall. He didn't wait to look back, didn't wait for confirmation from his team. He just ran. The others followed close behind, but as they rounded the corner of the house, a sharp, high-pitched sound pierced the air, a warning signal. A series of black SUVs sped down the street, and armed men flooded the area, blocking their escape routes. They were surrounded. "Not again," Elon muttered under his breath, but the words barely escaped him. The enemy was everywhere. They were trapped. As Elon and his team fight to escape the clutches of the organization, they realize just how deeply they've angered their enemies. Their safe house is compromised, and the leader of the organization reveals himself to be more dangerous and closer than they ever expected. With no time to lose, they make a desperate run for it, but as they try to escape, they find themselves cornered by the full force of the organization's operatives. The pressure mounts, and the odds seem insurmountable. The tension in the air was suffocating as Elon and his team stood frozen, surrounded by the black SUVs and heavily armed men. The safe house had been compromised, their escape route cut off. Elon's pulse raced as he scanned the area, looking for any potential opening, any possible way out. But every angle seemed covered, every route blocked. The leader of the organization, the man who had been hunting them, stepped forward from the shadows, his mask now removed to reveal a sharp, calculating face. His eyes gleamed with dark satisfaction as he surveyed the group. "Elon Musk," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "You've made this personal. You've gone too far." Elon's mind raced. There had to be something they could do. They couldn't just surrender. He wouldn't let everything they had fought for go to waste. "Who are you?" Elon demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. "What do you want?" The man smiled, the expression cold and emotionless. "I think you know exactly who I am. You've seen the files. You've uncovered parts of the truth. But there's so much more you don't understand." He took a slow step forward. "You see, Elon, this isn't about money. It's about control. The power to shape the world as we see fit. And you? You've been a pawn in a game much bigger than you could ever comprehend." Elon's heart sank. He had known they were dealing with something enormous, something far beyond a simple conspiracy, but hearing it from the man himself sent a chill through him. But he didn't have time for philosophical debates. He needed to focus. His eyes darted toward his team, Gwen, Isabel, and the others. They were ready, poised to act. They just needed a signal. "We don't need to hear your monologue," Gwen said, cutting through the tension. "We already know what you're capable of. But this ends now." The leader laughed. "You think you're in control? You think you have any power here?" He waved a hand at the armed men around them. "I have an army at my disposal, Elon. You have nothing." For a moment, silence fell over the group. Elon could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him, suffocating him. But as the seconds passed, his resolve hardened. He had come too far to back down now. They were not going to go out like this. "We're not done yet," Elon said, his voice low but filled with determination. Suddenly, the sound of tires screeching against the asphalt broke through the tension. A black van skidded into the alleyway, its doors slamming open as a team of armed operatives poured out. For a brief moment, chaos erupted, as everyone moved in a blur of action. Elon's mind was racing, but his body moved on autopilot. Gwen took charge of the situation, directing the team with the precision of someone who had been in countless firefights. Isabel, ever resourceful, reached into her bag and pulled out a small device. "This is our chance," she whispered to Elon. "I've got a hack in place. It'll disrupt their communication grid for a few minutes. We can use that window to slip away." "Do it," Elon said, his voice barely above a whisper. The device emitted a low beep as Isabel pressed a button, and within moments, the air was filled with static. Communication between the operatives faltered, and for the first time since the ambush began, Elon saw a flicker of doubt in the leader's eyes. Gwen was the first to react. She fired a shot that took down one of the guards near the van. The team scattered, using the brief distraction to create separation between them and the enemy. Elon, feeling the adrenaline surge through him, ran for cover behind an old car parked against the alley. The sound of gunfire erupted around him, but Elon kept his focus. There was no time to look back. He had to keep moving. In the chaos, Elon noticed something that sent a chill through him. A figure in the distance, moving with ease through the gunfire. It was a familiar face, someone he hadn't expected to see. The betrayal was complete. Isabel, the one person he had trusted more than anyone, was in the midst of the enemy. "Elon," Isabel called out, her voice distorted by the gunfire. "Get out of here. Now." But Elon didn't move. His brain refused to process what his eyes were seeing. Isabel, his ally, his teammate, was working with the enemy. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Gwen, who had been covering their retreat, glanced back and saw the same thing. "Elon, don't. She's not who you think she is." "No," Elon shouted, his voice shaking with disbelief. "She's been working with us." "She can't be." "It's a trap," Gwen interrupted. "She's been feeding them information. Everything we've done, all the plans, we've been playing into her hands." The truth sank in like a blade to the heart. The one person Elon had trusted above all others had been orchestrating their downfall from the very beginning. In a split second, everything changed. The enemy, emboldened by their betrayal, pressed forward. Elon felt the walls closing in as the trap tightened. But just when it seemed like they were done for, a new sound echoed through the alley, the roar of a helicopter approaching. "This is our chance," Gwen said, her voice filled with urgency. "We move now, or we're dead." Elon didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the chopper, the enemy hot on their heels. Isabel's voice called after them, but he couldn't bring himself to look back. The betrayal cut too deep. They had one shot to escape, and if they didn't take it now, they wouldn't survive to fight another day. Elon and his team find themselves trapped in a deadly confrontation with no way to escape. The leader of the organization reveals the true scale of their power and control, but just as the situation seems hopeless, a betrayal by one of their own turns everything upside down. Isabel, who had been working with Elon from the start, is revealed to be a mole. As the team scrambles to survive, a helicopter arrives, giving them their last chance to escape, if they can outrun the enemy. The helicopter's blades whipped the air into a frenzy, creating a deafening roar that drowned out everything else. Elon barely registered the rush of wind as he scrambled up the ladder, his legs shaking with exhaustion. He could hear the pounding of footsteps behind him, the enemy closing in fast, but he didn't dare look back. Gwen was already in the chopper, pulling him up, her face grim but focused. Isabel's face, the face of the person who had once been his closest ally, flashed in his mind, but he forced the thought away. There was no time for emotion. Not now. They needed to escape. The helicopter jerked into the air, and within seconds, the ground below them grew distant, the chaos of the alley and the gunfire fading into the background. But as they soared higher, the weight of their situation became more apparent. The team had barely escaped with their lives, and now they were flying into an unknown future, without a clear plan and with everything they had worked for unraveling. Elon didn't speak at first. He couldn't. The betrayal still stung, too raw to process. But Gwen's voice cut through the silence. "We need to figure out what the hell just happened." Elon looked at her, his eyes dark. "I don't know. I don't understand how Isabel could have done this. She's been playing both sides. It's how she stayed in the game for so long," Gwen said, her voice tight with frustration. "She had us fooled, Elon. She's been feeding information to the organization, getting us closer to the trap. Every move we made, every step we took, she was one step ahead. Elon's stomach twisted as he thought back on all the moments where Isabel had seemed like their greatest asset. Her brilliance, her calm demeanor, her unwavering support, it had all been a lie. And now, they were on the run, with no idea who else could be trusted. "Where are we going?" Elon asked, his voice hoarse. "We're heading to a safe location, but it's not safe enough," Gwen replied. "We need to regroup, figure out what our next move is. We need to find out who else has been compromised." The helicopter banked hard to the right, and Elon looked out over the sprawling city below, his mind racing. Every person they had trusted, every piece of information they had relied on, had been compromised. The organization was everywhere, and now they were the targets. He couldn't help but wonder, had Isabel been the only traitor? Were there others in their midst? As if reading his mind, Gwen spoke again, her voice softer this time. "I know you're thinking about it, Elon, but we'll deal with it, one step at a time." Elon nodded, his eyes still fixed on the city below. "We need to expose them. Everything they've done. We can't let them win." "We will," Gwen said, her tone determined. "But first, we need to survive long enough to do it." The helicopter flew in silence for a while, the world below them shrinking as they gained altitude. The landscape was peaceful, almost serene, but Elon couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in his gut. Every second that passed without a plan in place felt like a countdown to something worse. As the minutes ticked by, the helicopter flew toward a remote location, an old, abandoned facility they had used in the past as a safe house. But Elon knew better than to assume it would be safe. They couldn't afford to trust anything anymore. "I'm not going to lie, Elon," Gwen said, breaking the silence again. "This could be the beginning of the end. If the organization wants us, they'll keep coming. They'll stop at nothing." "I know," Elon replied, "but we have to keep fighting. We have to expose them. We can't let them control everything." The chopper finally touched down on a flat, open area next to a dilapidated building. Elon's heart raced, his hands sweating as the helicopter's engines powered down. The sense of relief that had filled him only moments ago began to fade, replaced by a cold, harsh reality. They were safe, for now, but they couldn't stay here long. As they disembarked from the helicopter, Elon's mind was already working, formulating a plan, running through the steps they needed to take. They needed information, more than ever, and they needed to figure out who they could trust, because it was clear now that they couldn't trust anyone they hadn't known for years. But as he walked into the abandoned building, ready to set up their temporary headquarters, one thought kept echoing in his mind. How many more people were they going to lose before this was over? Elon and his team narrowly escaped from the clutches of the organization, but the betrayal of Isabel hangs heavily over them. The helicopter ride to a new safe location offers a brief respite, but the tension remains. They realize that the organization's reach is far more extensive than they initially thought, and trust is in short supply. With the future uncertain, Elon resolves to continue the fight, but the cost of victory is becoming clearer with each passing moment. The safe house was cold and abandoned, its walls peeling from years of neglect. The kind of place where time seemed to stand still, where every creaking floorboard and rustling wind felt like a whisper from the past. It was the perfect place to lay low, to regroup after their harrowing escape. But for Elon, it felt more like a tomb than a sanctuary. Gwen was already setting up their equipment, a laptop open in front of her as she scrolled through files. She was trying to re-establish some semblance of control, but Elon could see the fatigue in her eyes. The toll of the last few days had worn them all down, emotionally, mentally, and physically. "Any leads?" Elon asked, his voice low. Gwen didn't look up. "We're still piecing things together. But the files we recovered from Isabel's phone, it's like she was living two lives. Everything she told us, everything she promised, was a lie." Elon couldn't focus on the details. His mind kept returning to that moment, the moment when Isabel had turned against them. The betrayal had been swift, brutal, and devastating. How could he have missed the signs? How could he have trusted her so completely? He walked across the room and stood by the window, staring out into the dimming light of the evening. The city below them seemed peaceful, as if life had continued on without a care for the chaos they had just narrowly escaped. But Elon knew better. They were far from safe. I'm not going to let her destroy everything we've worked for, Elon said, his voice hard with resolve. We need to go after her. We need to find out who else she's working with. Gwen paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She sighed, leaning back in her chair. I get it, Elon. You want to fix this, but we don't even know where to start. She's gone underground. There's no trail, no leads. Elon turned to face her, his expression grim. Then we make our own trail. There was a long silence before Gwen spoke again. You're talking about going after the organization directly. You're talking about war. We don't have a choice, Elon replied, his voice low but filled with urgency. If we wait any longer, we lose everything. Our team, our resources, it all becomes irrelevant. We have to take the fight to them. Gwen looked at him, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, Elon felt the weight of her gaze, as if she were weighing the cost of this decision. You're right, she finally said. We don't have a choice. They spent the next few hours strategizing, mapping out their next moves. But the one thing that kept gnawing at Elon, the thing that wouldn't let him rest, was the knowledge that Isabel's betrayal wasn't the end of their problems. There were others out there, others who were just as dangerous, just as hidden, and just as willing to sell them out. I've been thinking, Gwen said, breaking the silence. We need someone who can help us from the inside. Someone who knows the organization. Someone we can trust. Elon's mind raced. They couldn't afford to trust anyone easily anymore. They had been burned by Isabel, and he wasn't about to make the same mistake again. But there was one person, one contact, who might be able to help them. Someone from Elon's past. I know someone, Elon said slowly, a plan beginning to form in his mind. Someone who's been off the radar for a while. But if we reach out to them, they might just be the key. Gwen raised an eyebrow. Who? Elon's lips twisted into a tight smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. A former associate. Someone who owes me a favor. I don't know how much I like the sound of that, Gwen muttered, but she didn't argue. But I guess at this point, we don't have much choice. We'll have to be careful, Elon added, his voice serious. We can't trust anyone unless we know for sure where their loyalty lies. As the night wore on, the team worked in silence, the weight of their decisions pressing down on them. They knew they were on the edge of something huge, something that could either save them or destroy them. But one thing was clear. They couldn't fight this war alone. The next day, Elon made the call. The voice on the other end was raspy, as if the person hadn't spoken in a while. But there was no mistaking the recognition in the tone. Elon, the voice said, disbelief and suspicion in every word. You've got some nerve calling me after all this time? Elon didn't waste any time with pleasantries. I need your help. I'm in a situation, and you're the only one who can help me get out of it. There was a long pause, followed by a low chuckle. Always straight to the point. What's the catch? The catch is this. I'll owe you, Elon said, his voice cold and firm. But I need you to get us inside the organization. I need information, and I need it now. Another pause. I don't know if you remember, Elon, but getting inside that organization isn't exactly easy. You're talking about people who don't play by the rules. I know what I'm asking, Elon replied, and I'm prepared to pay whatever price it takes. You in? The voice on the other end was silent for a moment, and then, finally, the answer came. All right, Musk. I'll help you. But don't say I didn't warn you. This isn't going to be pretty. Elon and his team regroup in a safe house, but the reality of Isabel's betrayal still hangs over them. As they begin to plan their next moves, Elon realizes that the only way forward is to go on the offensive, targeting the organization directly. With trust in short supply, Elon reaches out to an old associate for help, but this risky alliance comes with its own dangers. The team prepares for a dangerous mission to infiltrate the enemy from within, but the stakes have never been higher. The morning light filtered through the broken windows of the safe house, casting long, eerie shadows across the room. Elon stood by the table, staring at a map spread out before him, a complex web of connections and locations that seemed to stretch endlessly. Every line on the map represented another layer of the enemy's reach, another roadblock they would have to overcome. Gwen was at his side, her eyes scanning the map, but even she couldn't hide the weariness in her posture. The tension between them was palpable, as if the very air in the room was thick with the weight of their next decision. There was no turning back now. "I never thought we'd be here," Gwen said quietly, her fingers tracing one of the lines on the map. "I thought we were going to build something that would change everything. And now look at us. We're trying to tear down something we barely understand." Elon didn't respond immediately. His mind was elsewhere, running through the details of their plan. The associate he'd contacted had come through, an old contact, someone who owed him more than one favor. But the price would be steep. Getting inside the organization was no small feat, and even with the intel they had, they would be walking into the lion's den. "I didn't come this far to back down now," Elon said, his voice low, but firm. "We have to go after them, Gwen. We can't keep hiding. This is the only way we're going to get to the heart of it." Gwen met his gaze, her eyes sharp. "And what if we fail? What if we walk into the lion's den, and we don't come back?" Elon held her gaze for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. "Then we fail. But at least we tried. We can't live in fear anymore." The sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation, and Isabel's former right-hand man, someone they'd taken on in the wake of her betrayal, stepped into the room. His presence was a reminder of how quickly things could fall apart, how fragile trust had become. "We're ready," he said, his voice steady despite the tension. "The contacts made the arrangements. We leave in an hour." Elon nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. Every instinct told him to be cautious, to wait, to gather more intel. But time was running out. The organization was closing in, and if they didn't act now, they risked losing everything. "Let's do it," Elon said, pushing the doubt aside. "Get the others. We're moving out." The drive to the designated meeting point was quiet, each member of the team lost in their thoughts, the weight of the upcoming mission pressing down on them. Elon could feel the tension in the air, a collective uncertainty that hung like a dark cloud. Every part of their plan was delicate. One wrong move, and they could be walking into an ambush. As the car approached a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Elon's pulse quickened. This was the place. The contact had set it up, a neutral ground where they would meet someone from inside the organization. The details were sparse, and Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. But he pushed the nagging sense of dread aside. When the car came to a stop, Elon gave Gwen a brief nod. It was time. The team moved quickly, entering the warehouse with the practiced precision of a well-coordinated unit. Inside, the space was empty, save for a few crates and scattered debris. The air smelled of dust and stale metal, and the flickering light from overhead cast strange shadows on the walls. "Where is he?" Gwen whispered, her hand hovering near her sidearm. Before Elon could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows. The man was tall, dressed in a black jacket, and his face was partially obscured by a hood. He moved with the grace of someone who knew how to stay hidden, his steps soundless as he approached them. "You're late," the man said, his voice smooth and devoid of emotion. "But then again, I didn't expect you to make it this far." Elon stepped forward, his gaze steady. "You've got what we need?" The man's lips curled into something like a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Information, yes. But information comes at a price, Musk. I'm not here to do you any favors." Elon's hand instinctively went to his pocket, where he had a small encrypted drive containing a massive sum of money, the last of their funds. "This is what we agreed on. But if you're holding back, it won't be for long." The man didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded slightly, as if considering Elon's words. "You're right. You've got the money, and I've got the intel. But let's make one thing clear, Musk. Once you go down this road, there's no turning back. The organization is everywhere. And you've already made enemies you don't even know about." Elon didn't flinch either. "I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to end this." The man's smile widened. "That's the spirit. But be warned. You'll be walking into a war that's already been waged for years. The organization has its fingers in every pie. What you think you know is only the beginning." With a sharp motion, the man handed over a small, unmarked envelope. Elon took it without hesitation, his pulse quickening as he sensed the magnitude of the moment. This was it, the intel that could tear the organization apart. But as Elon opened the envelope, a cold chill ran through him. Inside was a single sheet of paper with only one line written on it. "You're too late." Elon and his team enter the belly of the beast, meeting a shadowy contact in a desolate warehouse to secure the information they need to infiltrate the organization. But when the envelope is opened, they're confronted with a chilling message: "You're too late." This only deepens the mystery surrounding the organization's reach, suggesting they've been outmaneuvered at every turn. With trust stretched to its limits and no clear path ahead, the team must face the consequences of their actions and decide how far they're willing to go to expose the truth. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the empty warehouse as Elon clutched the cryptic message in his hand. The words, "You're too late," seemed to burn into his mind, a reminder that whatever game they thought they were playing, the rules had already been set by someone else, someone who had been watching them every step of the way. Gwen was the first to break the silence. Her voice was tense, her words clipped. "This feels like a trap. This whole thing, it doesn't add up. We thought we were in control. We thought we were making progress." Elon didn't respond at first. He folded the piece of paper carefully, slipping it into his jacket pocket as the gravity of the situation sank in. They'd been so sure that this contact would lead them to the next step, to a breakthrough. Instead, they had walked into a dead end. A message, a warning. It felt like a mockery. "We need to regroup," Elon said, his voice more resolute than he felt. "Let's get back to the safe house. We need to figure out what this means. Who's behind it, and why are they so far ahead of us?" The drive back to the safe house was tense. Every mile felt longer than the last. The team was exhausted, their nerves frayed by the constant pressure of being pursued by an enemy they could no longer fully understand. Elon stared out of the window, his mind racing with possibilities. How could they have been outmaneuvered so thoroughly? It was only when they reached the safe house and began settling in for another round of planning that Gwen spoke again. "There's something else," she said, her voice uncertain. "Something I've been holding back." Elon turned to face her, his brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" Gwen hesitated for a moment, then spoke quickly, as though the words were spilling out faster than she could stop them. "I've been going through Isabel's files again, the ones we recovered from her phone. There's something in there that doesn't sit right." Elon's stomach tightened. "What did you find?" "I don't know yet," Gwen admitted, "but there's a pattern. Isabel wasn't just working for the organization. She was working with someone else. Someone who's been manipulating everything from the beginning." Elon's mind went blank. "What do you mean? Who could have been behind her?" Gwen's face hardened. "I don't know, but there's a name that keeps coming up. A name I didn't want to believe." Elon stepped closer, his heart pounding. "Tell me." Gwen swallowed, looking down at the laptop in front of her before answering. "It's yours, Elon. Your name is in her files. Over and over again. You're listed as someone she was in constant contact with." For a moment, Elon couldn't process the words. His mind rejected the possibility that there could be a connection between Isabel and himself beyond the betrayal. But the pieces were starting to click together, painfully slow. If Isabel had been reporting to someone, then that someone wasn't a stranger. "That's impossible," Elon said, but the words felt hollow. "There must be some kind of mistake. I never worked with her like that." "I'm telling you what I found," Gwen said, her voice shaking. "It looks like she was setting you up. Everything she told us, all of it. It was a setup, and you were her target." Elon's thoughts spun. Isabel had been a close ally, someone he had trusted more than most. But now, everything they had worked toward, everything they had believed in, was being called into question. Had she always been working against him? Or had she been manipulated too? The realization was like a slap in the face, a bitter taste of betrayal that he couldn't shake. They had been so focused on the external enemy, the organization, that they had failed to see that the most dangerous threat might have been closer than they ever imagined. "What does this mean for us?" Elon asked, the question coming out more like a whisper than he intended. Gwen met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and resolve. "It means we're not just fighting the organization anymore. We're fighting someone from within, someone who knows us better than we know ourselves." Elon's mind raced as he tried to process the enormity of their situation. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. He had been betrayed by someone he had once trusted. But even worse, it felt like this was a much bigger conspiracy, one that stretched far beyond anything he had imagined. It was no longer just about the organization. It was personal. Suddenly, the weight of everything, the danger they were in, the people they had lost, the secrets they were uncovering, felt almost unbearable. Later that night, as Elon sat alone in the dimly lit room, he stared at the message from the warehouse. "You're too late." It was as if the words were a countdown, a ticking clock reminding him of how far behind he really was. But there was one thing that kept coming back to him. Gwen's words. "You're fighting someone from within." Was there a traitor in their midst? Was someone still working against them? Someone they trusted? The possibilities were endless, and none of them were comforting. He couldn't shake the thought that someone knew everything about them. Someone had been pulling strings from the start, and now that person was preparing to finish what they had started. Elon's fists clenched as he stood up, a single thought running through his mind. He wouldn't let this betrayal define him. He wouldn't be outsmarted again. Not now. Not ever. "We'll find them," he muttered to himself, determination flooding his veins. "Whoever they are, we'll find them, and we'll take them down." The team is left reeling after discovering that Isabel's betrayal was far deeper than they initially thought. Gwen uncovers startling evidence that Elon himself was somehow involved in the conspiracy, with his name appearing repeatedly in Isabel's files. As the team grapples with the possibility of a traitor within their ranks, Elon realizes that they are no longer just fighting an external enemy, but an internal one too. With the stakes higher than ever, Elon makes a vow to find the mastermind behind it all, even if it means confronting the darkest parts of his own past. The days following the revelation that someone from within their own ranks might be responsible for the betrayal were clouded with uncertainty. The weight of doubt hung over Elon like a suffocating fog, every interaction now laced with suspicion. The team's dynamic, once built on trust, had begun to fray. No one spoke of it openly, but the atmosphere in the safe house had shifted. Everyone was on edge, constantly watching each other, unsure of who could be trusted. Gwen was the first to break the silence that had fallen over the group. She stood by the map, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, staring at the various locations they had marked as potential targets. "We need to figure out who's been feeding the enemy, and we need to do it fast." Elon nodded grimly, his mind racing with possibilities. If someone on the inside was working against them, they were essentially fighting a war on two fronts. Whoever this person was, they had access to everything. Their plans, their movements, their strategies. And if the enemy was as far ahead as it seemed, it was only a matter of time before they struck again. "We have to start by looking at who's been closest to us," Elon said, his voice low. "Someone with access, someone who knows our weaknesses." Gwen gave him a sharp look. "And you don't think that includes you?" Elon's heart sank, but he met her gaze without flinching. The accusation hung in the air, the unsaid words too heavy to ignore. He had suspected as much, but hearing it from Gwen, someone he had come to rely on more than anyone, was like a punch to the gut. "I'm not the one feeding information to the enemy," Elon replied, his voice tight. "I've been trying to stop them, not help them." Gwen's eyes softened slightly, but there was still a flicker of doubt. "I don't know anymore, Elon. Everything we thought we knew. It's all in question now. Isabel was close to you. And now, this." The tension in the room deepened as Elon processed her words. If Gwen, the person who had been by his side through so much, was beginning to doubt him, then things were far worse than he realized. Before he could respond, a knock at the door interrupted their conversation. The sound was sharp, too deliberate to be casual. Elon motioned for the others to stay quiet, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun at his side. He was done playing games. When the door creaked open, a familiar face stepped inside, but it wasn't someone they had been expecting. Isabel's former right-hand man, the one who had betrayed her and joined their cause, walked in without hesitation. His face was grim, his eyes flicking between the team members. The room went silent, every person on high alert. No one trusted him completely, not after the way he had been involved in Isabel's downfall. But there was something about the way he entered that seemed different, almost like he had come to deliver a final blow. "Elon," he said quietly, his voice strained, "I think we need to talk." Elon's gaze hardened. "About what?" "I know you're all wondering who's been playing both sides," the man continued, his hands raised in a gesture of calm. "And I've been doing some digging of my own." The room tensed, the air thick with anticipation. Elon gestured for him to continue. "I think I know who's been feeding the enemy information," the man said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I think it's someone you're all going to be shocked to hear about." Elon's pulse quickened. His mind raced through the faces of everyone in the room. Who could it be? Who had access to the information they were so desperately trying to protect? "I've been watching, listening," the man continued, his eyes darting nervously. "And I know it's hard to believe, but the traitor, the person working with them, is someone from your own team. Someone you trust." Elon's mind immediately went to the most obvious candidate, Gwen. But the doubt in his chest was overshadowed by something deeper, something more unsettling. The suspicion gnawed at him. The man finally spoke, his words cutting through the silence like a knife. "It's Isabel's old handler, the one who was supposed to help you. It's me." The shock hit Elon like a freight train, his body freezing as the realization sank in. He had been wrong. The betrayal wasn't from someone else. It was from the very person he had taken in and trusted, the person who had convinced him they were on the same side. What are you saying?" Elon whispered, his voice shaking with disbelief. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but the weight of the words choked him. How could he have been so blind? "I didn't want this," the man continued, his voice full of regret. "I didn't want to be the one to break this to you, but I've been working with the enemy from the start. They have leverage over me, things I can't get out of. I tried to warn you, but they made sure you wouldn't listen." Gwen, who had been standing quietly by the table, looked at the man with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. "You've been working with them this whole time? After everything?" "I didn't have a choice," the man shouted, his voice breaking with emotion. "They promised me my family would be safe. They promised they wouldn't hurt anyone I care about if I helped them. But now I can't back out." Elon's mind spun. He had given this man a chance to redeem himself, to be part of the team. And now he realized he had been manipulated just as much as everyone else. "Why are you telling us this now?" Elon asked, his voice hollow. "If you've been working for them, why risk telling us?" The man looked down, his eyes filled with shame. "Because they're coming for you. All of you. They know you're getting too close. They've been watching your every move, and they've already set a trap. If you don't leave, if you don't get out of here now, you're all going to die." Elon's trust in one of his own team members is shattered when the person he thought was loyal confesses to being a double agent working with the organization. As the truth comes to light, Elon realizes that the stakes have become even higher. His own team may be the final battleground. With a trap closing in on them, the team is faced with the ultimate decision: fight or run. The lines between friend and foe blur, and the clock is ticking. The room was tense. The air, thick with betrayal and panic, was suffocating. Every word the former ally had spoken echoed in Elon's mind, replaying over and over like a nightmare they could no longer escape. "They've set a trap." The words hung in the air, a chilling reminder of just how close they were to losing everything. Elon's thoughts raced, his mind shifting between disbelief and a cold, calculating clarity. Gwen was the first to react, her eyes narrowing with determination. "We don't have time to waste. We have to get out of here now, regroup, and figure out what's next." Elon snapped his gaze toward her, seeing the urgency in her eyes. His team was on the brink of breaking apart, the trust they'd built fractured beyond repair. But there was no time to dwell on that. Not anymore. The trap was closing in, and their only chance was to act fast. "We can't just run," Elon said, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. He didn't know if he was trying to convince Gwen or himself. "We need to turn this around. We need to know what they're planning and stop it before it's too late." The former ally, who had remained silent up until now, seemed to shrink back at Elon's words. "I don't know how much time you have. They're not going to give you a chance to get ahead. You'll be walking straight into their hands. Elon turned to him, his expression cold. Then why tell us? Why risk it? I'm not asking for your forgiveness, the man said, his voice barely a whisper. I'm telling you this because they're coming. You can still make it out if you move fast enough. You can fight back, but you have to be ready for the worst. Gwen stepped forward, her eyes locking onto the man with a fierce gaze. If you're telling the truth, you have one shot to prove it. No more lies. The tension in the room was unbearable as the former ally nodded, his face etched with guilt. There's a safe house, he said quietly. It's where they're hiding, where the trap is set. I can get you in, no questions asked, but it won't be easy. They'll know you're coming, and they'll be ready. Elon's mind was already calculating their next move. They couldn't afford to waste time, but they couldn't go in blind, either. This was their one shot at turning the tide, and they couldn't risk losing everything. How long do we have? Elon asked, his voice sharp. The man hesitated, then said, a few hours. They're expecting a delivery, one that you're supposed to intercept. It's a setup, but it's your only window. Get to the safe house, and you'll find the answers. The people behind all of this, they'll be there. Elon's stomach churned at the thought of walking straight into the lion's den, but he knew they didn't have any other option. They couldn't keep running. It was time to face the storm. Gwen turned to Elon, her face a mask of determination. We're going then. We have to trust him. This is the only lead we've got. Elon met her gaze, his mind made up. He didn't trust the former ally, not completely, but they had no choice. They had to take the risk. We'll go in prepared, Elon said firmly. We'll make them regret thinking we were too late. The safe house was tucked away on the outskirts of the city, hidden behind layers of security and false identities. As the team made their way to the rendezvous point, the weight of the decision was heavier than ever. Each step felt like they were moving closer to the heart of the enemy's operation, and the fear of walking into a trap loomed larger with every passing minute. Gwen checked her weapon, her face grim. Are you sure about this? She asked, her voice low but steady. Elon nodded, his gaze never wavering. We don't have a choice. We take the fight to them, or they'll finish us. They arrived at the location just as dusk began to settle over the city. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch into eternity. Every step they took was cautious, deliberate. The weight of what was coming pressed down on them, and even the smallest sound seemed amplified, each noise a warning. They reached the building, a rundown warehouse on the edge of town, just as the man had described. The plan was simple. Get inside, disable any security, and find the information that would expose the organization's leaders. But as Elon and his team approached the entrance, something didn't feel right. This is too easy, Gwen muttered, scanning the area. It's too quiet. Elon nodded in agreement, his instinct screaming at him to turn back. But they had come too far. They couldn't afford hesitation now. As they moved into position, a sudden burst of gunfire erupted from behind them, catching them off guard. The team scattered, taking cover as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in the night. They had been set up. They knew we were coming, Elon muttered under his breath, his heart pounding in his chest. The former ally had disappeared into the shadows, leaving them with no one to trust. It was up to them now. Move, Elon shouted, signaling the team to push forward. They had to fight their way in, to confront whoever was behind the trap, to uncover the truth before it was too late. The gunfire intensified as they made their way through the narrow alleyways, dodging bullets and moving quickly to avoid detection. There was no turning back now. They had been drawn into a deadly game, and the stakes had never been higher. The team, now forced to face the consequences of betrayal, decides to take the risk and infiltrate the enemy's safe house. As they make their way to the rendezvous point, they realize too late that they've been lured into a trap. The former allies' warning proves to be too little, too late, and the team is thrust into a deadly firefight as they fight to uncover the truth behind the conspiracy. The gunfire echoed in the alleyway, reverberating off the grimy walls as Elon and his team sprinted toward the entrance of the warehouse. The sudden ambush had thrown them off, but they couldn't afford to panic. Every step they took now felt like they were walking a razor's edge, inching closer to the abyss that had been set before them. Elon, Gwen's voice rang out, her tone sharp. We need to move now. Elon didn't need to be told twice. They were surrounded, trapped. The enemy was everywhere, and they couldn't afford to hesitate. With one last glance toward the shadows where the former ally had vanished, Elon pushed forward, taking cover behind a stack of crates. Gwen was already at his side, her eyes scanning the surroundings, her hand gripping her gun tightly. The sharp crack of another round fired nearby brought them both back to focus. Are we sure this is the right place? Gwen hissed, her voice tight with tension. Elon nodded grimly. This is it. We just have to get inside, find the intel, and take them down. The plan had been simple, or at least it had seemed that way. Get in, get the intel, and get out. But now, with the enemy closing in and every second feeling like it could be their last, nothing seemed simple. Elon, we can't keep fighting our way through this place, she said, eyes narrowing as she looked for another way in. They'll wear us down before we even get close. He turned his attention to the building's perimeter. The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking structure that had once been a storage facility but now felt like a fortress. The windows were boarded up, the door reinforced with steel. They'd need to find a way inside without alerting the entire compound to their presence. We have one shot at this, Elon said, his voice low. He pulled out a small device from his jacket pocket and handed it to Gwen. This is a remote override. It'll disable their security systems long enough for us to get inside. We just need to make sure they don't see us. Gwen studied the device for a moment, nodding her approval. Got it. But you'd better hope this thing works. They moved quickly, circling the building to avoid being seen. The night air was thick with the sounds of distant footsteps, the hum of surveillance equipment, and the tension that seemed to hang over everything. Elon's heart was pounding in his chest. This was their moment of truth. If the enemy had anticipated their every move, if they'd prepared for this, then it would all be over. But if they succeeded, if they could get inside and uncover the truth, then they might finally have a chance to end this nightmare. Gwen reached the back door, where the device fit perfectly into the access panel. She pressed a button, and a small green light flashed, signaling the success of the override. Now we go, Elon urged. They slipped inside, moving as quietly as possible through the dark corridors of the warehouse. The air was thick with the smell of dust and mildew, and the only sounds were the scuff of their boots against the concrete floor and the faint hum of machinery somewhere deeper in the building. The hallway led them to a stairwell, descending into the heart of the facility. Elon motioned for Gwen to lead the way, both of them knowing that the deeper they went, the closer they got to the heart of the operation. The deeper they went, the more danger they would face. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, they were met with a long hallway lined with locked doors. Each one seemed to lead deeper into the compound's secure areas, but they needed to be careful. If they triggered any alarms or ran into resistance, everything would fall apart. They moved past the doors, silent and focused, until they reached a control room at the end of the hall. The door was ajar, and inside, they saw a lone guard sitting at a desk, his attention focused on a series of monitors. Gwen signaled for Elon to stay back, then moved swiftly, slipping inside like a shadow. In one fluid motion, she took the guard down without making a sound, her expertise evident in every move. She returned to the door and nodded at Elon. Clear. Elon stepped inside, scanning the room for anything useful. The control room was filled with computers, monitors, and a massive map of the facility, pinpointing security checkpoints, escape routes, and even locations marked with the enemy's objectives. But it wasn't the map that caught his eye, it was the data on the screen. A series of encrypted files were open, detailing names, operations, and plans for the enemy's next move. But there was one file that stood out. Its title was a series of numbers and letters, but Elon knew immediately that it held the key to everything they had been working toward. This is it, Elon murmured, his voice filled with a mix of disbelief and triumph. This is what we've been looking for. He began to download the data, his fingers moving quickly over the keyboard. Each second felt like an eternity, the knowledge that they had only a limited amount of time pressing heavily on him. As the download completed, Elon disconnected the drive and turned to Gwen. We've got what we came for. Let's move. But as they prepared to leave the control room, A sudden noise from down the hallway froze them both in place. Heavy footsteps echoed through the building, followed by muffled voices. It was a patrol, coming straight toward them. "Damn it," Gwyn muttered, her hand instinctively going for her weapon. "Elon, we need to move now. If they find us, it's over." Elon nodded, his mind racing. They couldn't afford to get caught, not after coming this far. The stakes had never been higher. They turned and bolted for the exit, but as they rounded the corner, the harsh sound of a door slamming open rang through the hall. Elon's heart skipped a beat. "Move!" They sprinted down the hallway, gunfire erupting behind them. The building's once silent interior now seemed alive with the sounds of pursuit. But they didn't stop, not even for a second. They had what they needed, and they couldn't afford to lose it now. The exit was in sight, but there were more guards ahead, blocking their way. Elon's mind raced for a solution, but there was no time. Gwyn reached into her bag and pulled out a flashbang, tossing it down the hallway with expert precision. The explosion of light and sound gave them the split second they needed. They pushed through the doors and into the night, their hearts pounding, breath coming in ragged gasps. But even as they escaped, Elon knew that their mission was far from over. The enemy knew they had come for the truth, and now the real fight was just beginning. Elon and his team infiltrate the enemy's safe house, discovering critical intelligence that could turn the tide in their fight. However, their success is short-lived as they are ambushed by guards and forced into a dangerous escape. With the truth now in their hands, they must prepare for the inevitable retaliation. The escape was barely a victory. The night air had never felt so heavy, the weight of their mission pressing down on Elon and his team as they ran, their breaths ragged from the exertion and the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. The information they'd acquired was crucial, but they couldn't afford to stop now. The enemies they'd uncovered were not just powerful, they were ruthless, and they would not rest until they had silenced Elon and his team forever. As they reached their safe house, the first real moment of relief settled in, though it was tempered by the knowledge that this was only temporary. The battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "Is everyone all right?" Elon asked, his voice hoarse from running. Gwyn nodded, but her face was grim. "We're alive. But that's about all we've got going for us right now." "Agreed," Elon muttered, his gaze distant as he reviewed the data they had stolen. "But this is what they've been hiding. The whole operation, the people behind it. They've been operating under the radar for far too long. And now, it's our turn to bring them down." But even as he spoke the words, a cold, uncomfortable realization gnawed at him. The more he delved into the data, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about taking down a criminal syndicate. There were forces at work, far more influential than anyone had anticipated. This was bigger than all of them. Gwyn stepped closer, her hand resting on his shoulder. "You're thinking it too, aren't you?" Elon looked up at her, his face hardening. "Yeah, this isn't just a fight against a few bad players. These people have ties everywhere: government, corporations, media. If we expose them, it's not just going to be us in the firing line. The world will change." "Then let it," Gwyn said, her voice fierce. "We can't back down now. We've come too far." Just as Elon was about to respond, his phone buzzed. He looked down at the screen, his heart skipping a beat. It was a message from an anonymous source, someone who had been watching their every move. "You think you've won? This is only the beginning. The storm you've unleashed will come for you. And when it does, you won't be ready." The message sent a chill through Elon. It was a threat, but it was more than that. It was a warning. "We've been compromised," Elon said, showing the message to the team. Gwyn cursed under her breath. "We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we've got to keep moving. We've already put everything on the line for this." Elon clenched his fists. The clock was ticking. The enemy was closing in, and there was no turning back. Their mission had escalated into something much larger than just personal survival. It was a fight for the future, a fight to expose the darkest forces in the world. "We fight now," Elon said, his voice low but determined. "We fight them on our terms, with the truth. They may think they can control this, but they're wrong. It's time to take the power back." The team spent the next several hours preparing. They needed to get the information to the public, to those who had the power to expose the conspiracy. But they couldn't do it alone. They needed allies, and they had precious few left. Elon made the call. The silence in the room was palpable as he waited for the line to connect. He had no idea if anyone on the other end would answer. But as the phone rang, he held his breath, knowing that the fate of their mission, and perhaps the world, rested on this moment. Finally, the line clicked. Elon Musk, came the voice on the other end, familiar yet strained. What's going on? We've been hearing rumors. It's worse than you think, Elon replied, his voice tight. We've uncovered something massive, something that goes all the way to the top. We need your help to take it public. And we need it now. There's no time left. The voice hesitated for a moment. I don't know if this is even possible. If what you're saying is true. It's true, Elon interrupted. I can send you everything. But you have to move fast. The people we're up against have resources. They'll do anything to stop us. The voice on the other end was quiet for a moment, then sighed. All right, send it to us. We'll make it public. But we can't guarantee anything. You're playing a dangerous game here, Elon. I know, Elon said, but it's the only game left. As the data was transmitted, Elon's mind raced. The pieces were all in place now, but the game was far from over. Their enemies would fight back, and they'd do everything in their power to silence the truth. But Elon had no intention of backing down. The storm had already begun. It wasn't long before the first waves of retaliation hit. Media outlets controlled by their enemies began to spin their own narrative, discrediting Elon and his team, labeling them as criminals, conspirators, even traitors. But the truth, the damning evidence they had uncovered, couldn't be buried forever. The world began to wake up. Protests erupted in cities across the globe, as people rose up against the powerful forces that had held them captive for so long. Elon's name became a symbol of resistance, of fighting for the truth, no matter the cost. But the battle was far from over. In the final scene, as the team stood together, watching the world react to the revelations they had brought to light, Elon couldn't help but reflect on everything they had been through. The betrayals, the danger, the uncertainty. It had all led to this moment. But it wasn't just about the fight. It was about the future. We did it, Gwen said, her voice soft but filled with pride. Elon nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. We did more than that. We changed the game. And in that moment, with the weight of everything they had fought for now behind them, Elon Musk realized that the world had finally been awakened. The storm they had unleashed was just the beginning, and nothing would ever be the same again. Elon and his team confront the full scale of the conspiracy they've uncovered, knowing the stakes have never been higher. In a final push, they expose the truth to the world, setting off a chain reaction that could change the future. But with the enemy closing in, Elon's resolve is stronger than ever. He will fight until the very end, no matter the cost.